It's real spicy. All right, it is 3 o'clock. I'm going to call our work session to order. Reagan, do you have comments for us?
Very few this evening. Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at your agenda, you've got one item on here that Jessica and Cindy will be updating you on, and that is a follow-up regarding the conversation around the AC Sandhills contract and other interested groups. And then we'll move into some general conversation. Jessica did a rather detailed memo for discussion of buildings. And then we'll have some updates on the homelessness conversation that's taking place. And then James has a number of public works items to go over with you. So with that, I'll simply give the mic back to you, and Jessica can come forward on the discussion of the contract.
All right, thank you. Jessica.
Good afternoon. So at the last council meeting 2 weeks ago, you had an item on your agenda to consider extending the partnership agreement with the AC Sandhills. And based on some community members who showed up and requested that we possibly consider their teams as well, you asked us to take another 2 weeks and report back at you today. We have had a lot of conversations over the past 2 weeks with the Sandhills, with Carolina Velocity, and also with Southern Pines Youth Rugby. We are very, very close to finalizing all of these, and so we would ask if you could just give us another 2 weeks to continue working through this. We think we'll be wrapped up in 2 weeks. I will say that all of the teams are using the fields and renting them now, so postponing them another 2 weeks is not going to hurt any of them. The Sandhills are using it as outlined in their agreement. Carolina Velocity, we're assigning them some rentals literally as we speak, and Rugby has also taken some rentals.
So I just wanted to make the point and ask you the question that I already know the answer to. I think there was no ill intent in regard to the fact that we heard stories of locked bathrooms last time, and I wondered if you would address that. And I think it's important that we
Sure.
take responsibility and also offer some forgiveness to new employees.
Yes, no, I appreciate you bringing that up so we can address that. After we heard that, I reached out to Carol Webb from Carolina Velocity, who is the one that made that comment, and just asked her if she could give me a little more details and including the dates on which that happened. And so she did give me dates when that had occurred, and Cindy King went back and looked through, and what we realized is we had 2 new staff members that started about that time. One of them was our athletics coordinator who coordinates field rentals, and then the other one was her administrative coordinator who handles the process of getting people keys and things like that. And I think it was just the perfect confluence of, we had a couple people who didn't realize. So there was no intent of keeping anybody out of the bathrooms or anything like that. So she has made sure that she'll address that training need with other staff people.
So thank you to you for that, and also thank you to Cindy. I understand she's made that part of her training, and apologies to the people who were locked out of the bathroom. It was our fault, not some hostile move between groups. So
No,
thanks.
not at all.
So it sounds like there's potential of all 3 groups being able to use the field.
So what I want to clarify is we have had a partnership with AC Sandhills for probably decades at this point. And because of that partnership, they are really an extension of our Parks and Recreation team. Instead of our staff having to go out and coach 750 players and pay for referees and uniforms and do practices and games and all of that, they do that work for us. And so there was never an intent to not renew that agreement with them. The reason that we've had this agreement is pretty new, because until Cindy started, it was really just a handshake. And And when she started, she correctly identified, we really need to get some of these things in writing, and Reagan agreed. And that's why you saw some agreements with the Sand Sharks, and we did the one with the AC Sandhills, and we put a 2-year timeline on it, not that we intended to abandon that partnership now, but to go back and revisit pricing and scheduling and things like that, because the fact that they pay us is new. Until 2 years ago, they paid us nothing for these fields. And so through that written agreement, we've been collecting, like this past year, $12,000. So we said, let's just check back in 2 years, because we wanted to make sure that we're also covering, because we do have costs as well. And so our recommendation is that we extend the agreement with the AC Sandhills. We're in conversations with rugby. They also offer youth recreation rugby. They're a team that's based here in the Sandhills. And so we're looking to see if it makes sense to enter into an agreement with them or not. I'm not sure at this time that we physically have the capacity to enter into another agreement. We only have so many fields. One of the big challenges is they don't have lights. And so that considerably limits the amount of time that anybody can be out there. Some other things for consideration, since we have sod fields and not artificial turf, you can't schedule them nonstop. Like, we have to take breaks at certain times of the year, and that's when we do our turf management and we resod and things like that. So I just don't know, as of today, on those 6 fields, that we can accommodate that many groups. With that being said, we still have our traditional rental policy where we do rent out fields to anyone who would like it. So I don't want to say for certain today that the answer is no, but I'm not certain.
But you're working with them to try to work something out where at least they have access to it.
They have access now. We're in the process of renting them fields now, and they've been using them. I think they used them 5 or 6 times maybe over the fall. So, yeah.
So kudos to Cindy for turning us into written contracts where we needed them, so thank you.
Absolutely.
And I would say that, you mentioned that we were paid nothing, but I think there was an in-kind donation in that taking over our Parks and Rec program, basically. It served the town to have AC Sandhills there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I just, they had never paid us to use those fields in the past. They certainly are providing benefits, so I don't want to suggest that they were taking advantage of us or anything like that.
To expand on that a little bit, they had, over the years, they would make sizable donations to larger capital things that would occur out there, but it was a relatively informal agreement. They were an extension, they were running the recreation soccer program. The significant thing that changed in the market 2 years ago, of course, is that the Aberdeen Fields came on board. And particularly learning that Aberdeen was going to be entering into service level agreements and such with them and other groups, when Cindy came forward and said, we probably should set up the same thing, I couldn't have agreed more. Because again, it's a matter of, if they were going to move their entire operation there, that was going to have an impact on our programming, but it was also going to have an impact on availability of fields. I'd hate for the fields to sit there under the anticipation that AC Sandhills was going to be used. So it was a good opportunity to sit down and really talk about what the needs were for those fields versus what Aberdeen just spent quite a bit of money on developing, and the timing just sort of all came together. And the 2-year agreement, as Jessica said, it wasn't done with the intention of throwing them to the curb in 2 years, but in part it was, let's see how this goes for 2 years. It'll be a good opportunity to go back and see if anything needs to be tweaked or changed with the arrangement. And to the best of my knowledge, everything has gone very, very well. So that's the recommendation from Cindy and from staff that we continue with the relationship.
A few other just caveats that we're trying to work out. One is parking, and I know this is something Bill's really familiar with. And that's another reason why I don't know that we can commit to having that many teams out there. We already have parking challenges at Fire Lane. And so that's just a function of, that's the maximum number of people that we can host on these fields. Because there's been suggestions that, well, maybe if we put more kids on the field, we could bring more organizations in. Well, even on days when it's just Sandhills practices, we're overparked. So that I don't know how to work on or work around. Then I lost my other train of thought in
Well, I was
terms
going
of
to
where I was
ask
going.
you, which may or may not help you get your train of thought, but how many children are currently served and what percentage of those children are from Southern Pines, if you know?
My understanding is they range from 700 to 750 kids a season. I don't have data on how many kids are from Southern Pines proper. I don't know that they keep that because they handle the registration themselves and they charge everybody the same fee, regardless, because it's been kind of a Moore County program.
Do you have any idea how many people would be involved with Velocity? How many people participate on the Velocity League?
That I don't know. I understand that they've been asking for kind of singular games, so I think those numbers would be lower. I do know with rugby, they right now have about 200 local youth. They're growing very quickly. They had about 50 youth in 2020, and they're now around 200. So my understanding is that the majority of the Velocity players are north of us because they are out of Raleigh. So I think it's a much smaller number that they're looking to accommodate here.
Last I heard, I think it was like 7 teams.
7 teams.
I don't know what the roster looks like on those 7 teams. I would imagine it's 15 to 20 kids on a roster. I'm not sure.
Thanks. That's great.
Do you all have any other questions?
Baseball field to the left when you turn in, that's utilized, correct?
Correct. Yes. That one is sometimes rented out for the Sandhills, sometimes rented out. And then the Optimist Club, they also rent it out if they're over capacity at Memorial Park. So,
And then we use the outfield of Armory as well it can be rented out. So it's kind of a multi-use facet, both Optimist and Armory. However, when we've got baseball going on, it's hard for me to justify giving that field space dedicated to rugby or soccer because we obviously want to run to increase our baseball program. So I've got to, it could be a last minute type thing depending on if we need that space or not.
You mean the field to the left when you turn in as a last minute field?
Yeah, I think Cindy's going to come up,
Yeah.
just so you're on a microphone.
Yes, so currently in AC Sandhills agreement, in their, I think it's their fall agreement, they can use the outfield of Optimist. In the spring, or it might be opposite, might be now. But anyway, whenever we've got our biggest baseball program, which is in the fall, we have to keep that field open for the growth of our program, meaning that I can't rent.
Growth of the baseball program?
Correct.
It's not an auxiliary field, I guess is what I'm trying
It's
to get at.
not.
Okay.
No, it's a full-fledged baseball. And we use the Armory field in the same capacity.
that's another thing that we're trying to carefully consider because we do have these partnership organizations, but then we also have athletics that we host, and we don't want to lock out any of our programs by committing our fields to external partners that we can't grow. Some of our, we do flag football, which has really grown. Our Little Tykes soccer our numbers are increasing a lot there. So it's a lot of things to have to balance, 6 fields.
When you all rent to Velocity or Rugby or anybody else who wants to rent that field, on your notes, the AC is responsible for cleaning the bathrooms. Are they responsible for cleaning the bathrooms after the town rents to somebody else?
So the way it would work right now, if I know a number of the Velocity rentals are on Sundays, and so we would not expect them as kind of a one-off rental to clean the bathrooms on Sundays. Our team would come in on Mondays and do that.
Our
And-
team being Town of Southern Pines.
Town of Southern
Okay.
Pines, correct. One of the reasons that the Sandhills help us with that is just timing wise. Our Parks and Grounds team comes in early on Saturday mornings and knocks out all of their tasks. And so they're gone for the weekend by the time the AC Sandhills finish. So they help us by emptying the trash cans and things like that. I don't know that they do a deep bathroom cleaning, but if if it kind of needs it when they're done with their games and stuff like that, they'll touch it up. So,
And they take all the trash off the facility. So
Yeah, they
there's no
do.
trash left in the receptacles of any
Okay.
type, so.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
sure.
Sorry, you'll come back to us March 12th with additional information and a recommendation on a contract. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing that we're taking this time to do is to reach out to some other municipalities just to understand how they do it, to see if there's some new things that we can learn. We've had some really good conversations with the town of Cary. They operate Wake Med, which is a huge complex, and I mean, the good thing we've learned is we're very consistent with them. They have 2 partnership organizations and then other teams, and we understand Carolina Velocity falls in this other teams category. They're among a rotation. I mean, they don't even have enough field space in this, big Wake Med new complex. So,
The fact that the field is built upon what was originally a landfill, does that impact whether or not we would ever be able to have lights on that field, regardless of whether we had someone pay for them?
we don't know. Well, I don't know. That would be more of an engineering question, because in terms of, installing footers and things like that, I don't know. And I don't know what the soil type is like. We do know that financially it's a big cost burden.
Huge, yeah.
Cindy got a quote about 18 months ago, and it was $900,000. So that has, because of that, we haven't even pushed that.
Was that a quote for all the fields there, or just a couple of them?
Yes.
For all 6.
All fields, so also.
So, I mean, we could piecemeal that project, so you could do, a couple fields here and, over a phased time and.
And I assume that quote was purely the above-ground portion of that without knowledge of what they would get into relative to footings and such, which we had a little experience with in the building you're sitting in, so.
Lights only.
Yes. The other thing that I was going to mention that I had lost my train of thought is one thing that we're trying to address is ownership of the nets and goals, because the town does not own those. Sandhills has owned those, and it wasn't an issue before because they were always our only partner. They have graciously allowed teams, including Velocity, to use those when it's just a single rental here or there. If we were to enter into a more formal partnership agreement, I think we would have to be prepared to purchase nuts and goals, because it's really unfair to kind of expect AC Sandhills to provide those, because, they get wear and tear on them. So that's another consideration. It's kind of like an onion. The more we think about it, the more we look at it, we peel those layers back. So, but we will come back with a final recommendation.
Okay,
in 2
perfect.
weeks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You both. Council updates and discussion. Jessica, are you going to stay and present?
I'm going to stay.
Perfect.
Good to hear from me for a while. Right. So following the January 23rd presentation by CPL, I know that was a lot to take in, and it was a lot of new information to council. So you all had asked to put this on today's agenda. So I just wanted to go back and give you, kind of the history of this project, where we stand today, help to maybe identify some potential options for you. BJ, could you switch to the memo that I've written in the packet there? It is, yeah. So this current project that we're working on that you heard from CPL on last month, we've been working on that for about 6 months with them. We entered into a contract in August to do the schematic designs and kind of high-level cost estimating. So the work that you saw last month was the conclusion of that scope. The overall project, though, has a good bit more history. As I pointed out in the memo, and I included some documentation from this, back in 2018, 2019, the town did a couple of separate but parallel analyses, and one was a facilities condition assessment. And in that, Creech and Associates, who are architects and engineers, they came in all of our facilities. And they looked particularly at the mechanical, the electrical and plumbing, but they also looked at roofs and things like that. And the idea was to make sure that we were properly maintaining these buildings, preserving them, and they put together a lot of recommendations that we've been making a lot of progress through. And you'll see in your annual budgeting process, we have dollar amounts each year that goes to those types of projects. The other study that they did back at that time was a space needs analysis to identify where the town might be growing in terms of staff and services, where we might accommodate this growth. At that time, they identified that the town needed about 10% more space, square footage, just for the staff that we had back in 2018, 2019. And so the initial way that the town accommodated that was to advance the renovation and upfit of the community development building, what was formerly known as the Public Works Annex. That was completed in early 2022, and planning and inspections, engineering moved over there. And at that time, that left the current finance building about half vacant. And other than Mac, our attorney, who we now provide office space for, we haven't moved anybody back into the finance building, because the idea at that point was then to proceed with a renovation, because there was a lot of facility needs that the finance building had and still has, and so we would accommodate space needs then. So we've been advancing that. It's been in the past few years CIP, and then in this current year's budget, we had $100,000 to do these schematic designs and cost estimates. So that was the work that CPL did. And then some of that money is still reserved because Chief Cameron has some needs in Fire Station 2. So we're now at the point where, now that you have kind of a high level understanding of what that renovation might look like in both finance and the admin building and the potential costs, we've prepared a couple of different options for you. So one of the options is to advance one or both of the buildings through design development. That would be construction documentation, and they would actually assist us with construction procurement, writing the bid documents, analyzing the bid documents. There is a savings on those professional fees if we advanced both buildings simultaneously. It's about $52,000 savings if CPL advanced both of those buildings at the same time.
Savings in professional services?
Correct. They also, in their cost estimate that they prepared last month, that I've also put in this packet, they identified that there would be a phasing premium if these buildings were split out. They did not calculate that phasing premium at the time because they were trying to give us the most conservative cost estimate for renovating these buildings. One of the challenges that we know is that because the administration building is pretty small, we expect that we'd probably pay a premium if that were split out from the finance. So their recommendation was that we proceed with construction at the same time, under the same contract with the same contractor, so that we could have some cost efficiencies there. But if we wanted to split out, as of today, we know that the professional services would be approximately $52,000 higher if we just asked them to do one or the other of the buildings. In option number 2, I did explore LEED certification with them at a high level, and I say that because there's so many factors that go into the actual cost of LEED. We will see an increase in professional services. We'll see an increase, an expected increase in the construction contract, and then there are also application fees and review fees and things like that. And the reason they couldn't really give us a fixed figure today is because we would want to determine what level of certification we want to get for LEED, because there's 4 different levels. And obviously, the higher you go, the more accommodations you're making and the more they're designing to. It got to the point where they were going to have to put some considerable time into actually just giving us an estimate for professional fees. So I said, I think this is probably good enough for today's discussion, and if you all want to advance LEED certification, they can add that to their scope and help us figure out the level of certification. So that's kind of an add-on to any of those options in number 1. I guess before I proceed with talking about the option of having a newly constructed Town Hill building, I want to pause and see if you have any questions on the renovation projects, whether it's the next steps or what we might achieve with those renovations.
I do. I know it's in this packet, but I can't pull it up
Sure.
just quickly. How many people are in the finance building right now? 12?
12 is about right.
I feel like that's what I read, but now I can't find it. 12's right? Okay. And how many people are in the admin building?
I think that's 6. Mm-hmm.
And with the design or the renovation of the finance building, how many offices is that?
So let me see. I don't know that I have access to it. Well, I actually might be able to count around 20. Okay. And one of the things that we did ask them to do was to oversize some of the offices, especially in the finance building. We initially had a concept that had a lot more office space, and some of those offices were teeny tiny and like almost not functional. So we said, let's reduce the number of total offices and make some of them a little bigger. For example, we've had some success in the community development building where we've needed to. We've doubled up some staff members and offices. So we thought that would be a better approach. So I do think that there's capability to do that here.
And the expected growth of both of those departments, I know it's also in this packet. How many people would you expect to be in the finance building within the next 5 years?
Within the next
And
5 years,
whatever
they
number you
had
want, really, if you have a number.
they had programmed for 14 people.
I'm finding it now. Okay.
And then for admin and HR, they had programmed for a total of 12. And one of the reasons that sounds higher than the current administration building is because Gerald and I are both part of the administration team, but we're not housed in that building today. So that is one of the perceived changes, is that we would move over to that building to be with the administration department.
I think there's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, 14 buildings, and most of which are historic, means that it costs the town a lot of money to keep up all of the buildings. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's a constant turnover of things that need attention. And I feel like if we're going to put a bunch of money into renovating a building, my interest would be to do something that makes a substantial change that meets the needs of the town in 20 years. I mean, assuming that we finance something out that long, I hate for it to be okay for 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, so I would be leaning towards looking at something, some sort of town hall, and even if that means refinancing, or not refinancing, renovating the finance building in a way that grows it in height, in a way that creates the space we're going to need long-term.
And I have, that is something that I've talked at a high level with CPL about that. Because they were largely doing schematic programming and concept planning, they didn't do a lot of structural analysis to see if the building could handle additional stories. But based on their knowledge of the building, they do feel that it can accommodate more stories. And the idea would be that we would probably leave the lobby area as is. There's a very nice barrel ceiling in there that I don't think anyone would want to get rid of. And it also allows us exterior-wise to maintain the roof line there. That leaves about 3,500 square feet kind of back of house, if you think about where staff offices are today, which was an addition to that building at some point in the distant future. So that's about 3,500 square feet, and then you could add on to that back area. In my conversations with them, without doing a full structural analysis, I mean, they talked about the ability to probably go up to 3 stories. If that's something that we're comfortable with, you know, from an aesthetic standpoint, considering what's surrounding us. I mean, I've been through renovations and additions like this, and to go to one additional floor is a really high cost because you have to add an elevator and things like that. So when you then consider the addition of adding on one more floor, it makes it a lot more cost efficient to do that. So
Right, there's an economy of scale.
absolutely. So, I mean, my recommendation is if we want to pursue additional stories, that we determine if we're comfortable with 3 stories and go that route. Another option, and it could be a second option too, we could explore both of these if we really want to maximize our space. There is a large front yard at the finance building, and there could be some opportunities to bring that front facade out closer to the sidewalk. That would require some careful historic design because, you know, you got to pay good attention to that. I do know that the historic courtyards are kind of part of our public buildings, so we could keep that in mind. But for example, if you can envision, actually, BJ, can you pull up, there is a picture of the finance building. It's in one of those Creech analyses. Yeah, go. Yeah, actually, it's in my memo, sorry.
12.
And if you go back and start comparing space needs studies to square footage, and I know you said 3,500 square feet, I think when we talked about that, the actual usable square
That-
footage comes down because of internal stairwells and things of that nature.
Yeah,
Like,
so, yeah, can you zoom in on kind of that picture there, BJ? No, yeah, I might. So if you can envision the Boyd room over there, it's kind of hidden by the trees, but it already extends out a little bit from that front facade. So, you know, there's the ability that we could extend further out that way. We could maybe even extend off from the left side and maybe match that extension and then still leave some space to have kind of that courtyard entrance feel there. So there's a lot of different options. I think we could explore both and really maximize the amount of space that we get.
but relative to the site, your space is to the front of the building and vertical. There isn't
There's nothing in the back.
anything to the rear.
Yeah, yeah.
The road in the back belongs to the post office?
Correct. So that's what prohibits us there.
I mean, it's partial trying to be efficient with our existing space, but also I've seen enough of you all running around between different offices and trying to find each other and trying to figure out where you're going to meet. And if somebody wants to meet with one of us, it's a matter of, well, let me see if there's a space somewhere. I mean,
Right.
for 14 buildings, it's amazing that the space is not there.
Right.
The idea of getting rid of buildings obviously is not a huge, I don't know. I don't love the idea, but I also don't want to waste money owning buildings that we can't use.
Right.
I mean, and to think that there's as many people in admin as there are in finance, the buildings are very differently sized. And there's a bigger basement in the admin building.
Yes.
Doesn't make any sense to me either, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what you see, you know, our old buildings are wonderful and we love having that character, but you kind of have to fit into what you have and it's not always ideal. But
I like that idea of exploring that option of modifying, potentially, after getting some feedback from the public,
That's really pretty.
this building to accommodate more than just what we have here.
Do you have thoughts, Ann or Bill?
I agree with what they said. How are we able? Here's what frustrates me every time we do this. It's the 100,000 here, 50,000 there. You know, for any of these analysis, is there a way to get any kind of idea of these options without having to enter into a $100,000 6-month contract to review what, if that makes sense? I
yes,
hate
no, I
spending
definitely think.
a ton of money, which is a ton of money to me,
Right.
to get this information. And maybe that's what you have to do, but hopefully there's some way to get some of the preliminary without having to do that.
The project you're talking about, as I'm understanding it, really twofold. You're going to have the I'll call it the subjective conversation around how much forward are you going to come, how many stories are you going to go up, how's it all going to fold together, the barrel roof, all of that. There is an aspect of that, though, that I would suggest you're not going to want to cut corners on, and that's your initial structural analysis. That's probably the first step before spending a nickel on any of the other stuff, because if you can't go vertical, let's not have the conversation about going vertical.
No, but to your point, we could absolutely, if what they presented to you last month was phase 1, I think we could go to a phase 1A and further explore the structural needs and the ability to do that, to give you guys, confirmation that that works, and they can update the cost estimate. And then that gives us at least a couple options then to explore with the finance building before we would enter into any kind of contract on, the actual design development and bid documents and things like that. So,
Well, and not knowing who's going to go in the admin building, it feels like a lot of money to spend with let's fix the building, we'll get storage downstairs and offices upstairs, and then we'll figure out who's going to go there. I mean, I'd like to know where everybody goes before we enter into a
Well,
construction project.
we've had some internal conversation around a couple of different departments, one being Cindy's with Parks and Recreation, the Arts Council's busting at the seams in the Campbell House, and as I think you've all, except maybe Brandon, have seen their expansion plans there. So that's probably option 1A, would be to move the Parks and Recreation offices, staff over there. The second one we've looked at as we look at the future growth around Public Works and even the Community Development Building to an extent would be relocating IT yet again. Less excited about that because of the public nature of that building and being downtown, but right now they're sort of over in that Public Works building that's next to the Boys and Girls Club. So those are a couple of things that have been kicked around on that.
they were actually part of the space programming work that we recently did with CPL. And then we also, HR was another option that we explored, was just leaving HR in that building and then moving the rest of admin over. So all of those different departments were considered. And so where we landed was that this floor plan that's in there could accommodate any of them. And then when we advance to design development, that's when we would make the decision on the actual department and we'd confirm those details.
So I have, the parking behind the building here, is that belong to the town? The parking?
Probably not, since I don't think we own anything beyond the building line. Were you?
Chief Cameron says post office.
Okay. But clearly this building's been added on to before, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think they used all of the zero setback information of the CDBD to take it right up to the property line.
At some point, can we discuss, and it doesn't need to be today. See somebody in the picture.
BJ flying his phone drone down here. He got himself in the picture.
As far as the expansion of the Arts Council and the Campbell House, what the Campbell House cost us and how much they're covering of that expense. I understand there's the fields as well and the train house.
Yeah, right now, and they're actually due for a renewal on their contract. The Arts Council is not paying a monthly lease. That was dropped at the last contract, and then also the one previous to that, because they have, through their donors, done a number of upgrades to the building there, including the kitchen and some other areas. So in lieu of monthly rent, now they're covering some utilities and things, but in lieu of monthly rent, they have done improvements to that structure in the past.
Ann, what are your thoughts?
Questions. What is the justification for the $52,000 savings or lack thereof if we just did one building at a time? What is the justification for their expense of $52,000?
There's efficiencies from them working on both projects at the same time. And especially in terms of the bid documentation and the construction procurement phase, we're asking them to do that once versus 2 separate times.
That is being a negotiable factor.
I mean, I can always ask.
I would appreciate that, yeah. When you said, I think it was Reagan who said Parks and Rec, we're thinking over there, are you talking about moving them to the finance building when you say over there?
No, that was around the question of the current administration building, what would go into
Oh,
those
so moving
offices.
Parks and Rec to the current
Backfilling the
administration
current,
building.
yes.
Okay, I missed a part of that conversation, sorry.
Park.
Okay. And you are currently dispersed, if you will, from other parts of the admin team, and you also are housed with departments that you oversee. Do you think it's more important for you to be with departments you oversee, or more important for you to be with the rest of the admin team?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
So it's a challenge because no matter which building I'm personally in, the library is under me. So unless I move in the library, Parks and Rec is part of my team. BJ and planning are part of my team. Gerald, and then Beth. Personally, I feel like my departments have very strong leadership through the department heads. So they run very well on their own. So I don't really feel that it's necessary that I have to work side by side them on a day-to-day basis.
Advantage to doing so.
Well, there's always advantages. But personally, I feel like I do miss out not having direct access to Reagan on a daily basis. Beth and I work, very closely on the agendas and things like that. And she is someone, that I supervise directly, and I don't physically work with her. So that's a challenge. I also think now that we have Gerald, he serves the entire team. He works closely with Reagan. I think there's a benefit for getting him close to Reagan. I mean, I will work wherever you want me to work, honestly. I mean, we've made it work for 3 years. But that was the idea, is that there would be some improved efficiencies, conversations, things like that, bringing us physically with the admin team.
Do you?
Bottom line, there's pros and cons, and as Jessica, I think, just explained, if we were only in 2 buildings, that would be a relatively
Right.
easy discussion. There'd still be pros and cons, but given the fact that we're in so many buildings and spread so wide that inevitably you're not going to be next door to somebody that you need to have interaction with.
Do you see do you, either one of you, open question, and Mr. Cameron, you're welcome to pipe in too if you want. Do you see a disadvantage to administration all being encapsulated in one building together?
Not necessarily, because we have a lot, the administration team is bigger than just Reagan and me. In fact, Chief Cameron isn't even technically part of our administration team, but, there's a lot of employees that work with us that it makes sense for us to work closely with. So I don't know that that's a disadvantage. Another reason why the idea of bringing Gerald and me into the finance building is because we're honestly getting out of space at the community development building. There's a little bit of information I don't want to quite share because it's not public yet, but we're struggling to even figure out where we're going to get staff in a month in that building. So as I mentioned, we're already doubled up, in some places. And so that was part of that too, was to get a little bit of breathing room over into that building.
Yeah, even when you go to your space needs study, there were a position or two not contemplated in 2017 that with the growth that we've seen occur and then some of the changes that occurred around COVID, et cetera, that we've got some people that need seats over there that maybe weren't contemplated in the original plan.
We've already grown up, like that space needs analysis. We hit those numbers before.
Yeah, we hit them early, yeah.
Well, I guess you're going to have to, we all our opinions are colored by our past, and mine would be, having dealt with large schools where there were different buildings, and so it was important to have an administrator in every building. I think it would have been detrimental to have had all the administration packed in together in one location, and so far you've not convinced me that that's a bad idea here.
Well, I think part of the key in that is determining your definition of administration, because I've already heard, just listening to conversation, I mean, Jessica made reference to Mike Neek not being part of administration. If you're defining administration by those who are funded out of the administration budget, et cetera, that is true. Clearly, Mike is very much a member of the leadership team and part of the management team. So,
Right.
you know, even if Jessica were to leave the community development department over there, you've still got James and Corey and BJ. Like, a lot of the director team, the leadership team, is still located in that facility. You've still got Nedra over at IT, which is in that same campus area. So it all depends on how you want to define the word administration. I mean, in a school setting, you might be thinking central office. I don't know if you would consider in a school setting a principal part of administration or not. I honestly don't know. There's probably a technical answer to that. But
Probably not enough time for us to go through that, but I think that the question then is, do you think of Nedra and BJ and others as part of the administrative team? Do they then relinquish?
from the standpoint of
you
being
relinquish
part
the
of the leadership team, absolutely. We call them directors. We call them leadership team.
Right.
They are all
Answerable to you?
they are all answerable to me. Yes,
Are they answerable to Jessica?
yes,
Are they answerable to Mike?
yes.
And you want to put all of you in the same place?
No, Mike's actually not going anywhere under this
Right.
particular plan.
Right.
And again, they're
I
all
mean,
part of that leadership.
and I think that's because he is of the most use in the area which he oversees. I rest my case. I mean, I think that that's pretty important if he's running the fire department, that he be in the fire department.
The reality on a day-to-day basis, and Mike jump in, but I don't know that he spends a lot of time directly in the fire department as much as he does running between public works buildings. And I guess the challenge with that, because I don't want to argue the basic principle, but the challenge with that is where would you put Jessica relative to what she's already gone through
Right.
with Amanda, Cindy,
And I think it's important.
short of an 80,000 square foot singular building, and I don't think we're talking about that.
I think it's important that I acknowledge that I'm not really set in one opinion here. I'm asking questions because I think it's pretty healthy for us before we talk about spending millions of dollars.
No question.
I think we should spend a whole lot of time asking a lot of questions about what is our responsibility to people, to all of your children who perhaps will live here. What is our responsibility to them to make sure that we're effective and efficient? And what is our policy as far as, do you really want the administrative team all in one location? I think that's pretty important. That's a pretty important question.
Yeah,
I'd love to
the
hear-
town has escaped a major capital item for decades and decades
Understood.
and decades based upon having buildings given to them, granted to them, picked up. Unfortunately, it's never been a model for efficiency.
Right. Although it is a model of a sweet village, which many, many, many people are interested in maintaining that look and that feel. And I was here. I was involved in the battle over the library. I mean, I get it.
I've heard, not about you, just about the battle that
It
took
was a
place.
battle. It was a battle. I know. I
Sorry.
have no. I mean, I was the president of the Friends of the Library at the time, and just trying to figure out what was the smartest thing to do with the property downtown, and that is at the point at which the park happened next to the administrative building, when the old town hall came down, and I think the park plays a pretty important piece in our community, and. I think we give a nod to history here, and I realize I'm carrying the most history on my back, but I think we give a nod to history, and I also think we give a big nod to the public. I don't think we go running into this thing and say, oh, we're going to spend bazillions of dollars and relocate people. So I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts.
You know I try to sit on the back row, right?
I know you do. And I know that you, but then when I don't question you,
I know.
you give me a hard time and say, why didn't you beat me up, Ann?
I like it. So, my opinion is, from a management standpoint, we're set up where we have department heads, and we're very dependent on our department heads to be in the departments to be operating. We don't have any one department head that is always in that department all the time. So our structure lends itself to the way we currently operate. I don't think you see any changes in operations if you move assistant manager into the same building as a manager. You may see some more efficiencies out of the manager's office or by the administration, but I don't think you see any negative impact in those departments. As you know, what I do on a daily basis, as Reagan alluded to, is I'm not gonna say every day, but multiple times a week, I'm in every department that I oversee, just like Jessica is, because we see what's going on, and we deal directly with the department head, and department head handles whatever issues may be going in that department, not always with our direct input, but with indirect input.
Well, and I think one of the things that I most appreciate about you, and there are many things about you that I appreciate, but one of the things I most appreciate is if there is a conflict or a question, you are the first one to hop in a car and go to the scene of that conflict and try to figure it out. And I very much appreciate that. And I appreciate the mobility that you have and that you're able to do that. So I thank you. I am concerned about I'm concerned about I'm concerned about giving a mixed signal to our directors. Here you're in charge. No, not really.
Well, as opposed to taking the opposite approach,
Okay, great.
it may be that you get the assistant town managers out of the department head's hair sometimes.
It may be.
And
And
that could be a positive. That could be a positive. No offense to those that don't have hair.
I agree. No, I understand. I understand what you're saying. And if that's an issue, that's maybe an issue that we need to address with
Well,
policy.
I don't know that, I don't know that it's an issue, but it gives you the ability to
Right.
use management from a different approach.
Yeah, I think that I just would like, I think it's really important that I have no question about the fact that we are in a mishmash of buildings that may or may not offer efficiency, and that we need to really address. I understand the call for this. I'll be honest with you, I think that I'm not comfortable with, okay, here's a step, and now we're going to take the next step, and I'm not sure whether that's the right thing to do or not.
Can I?
Go ahead, Jessica.
You move me up here now. You move me-
Okay, go ahead. I want to hear from both of you. Go ahead.
So two items that I think you want to look at before we get
Okay.
the cart before the horse is from an efficiency standpoint, let's look at, obviously, number one, we need to see if we can even do anything with this building that we want to do. That'd be the first thing I think you do, and then figure out who goes into what building. That doesn't have to be decided now. The other thing is looking at efficiencies from a public standpoint. We are in different buildings, but on many occasions, we send the public to different buildings to do some of the exact same things they need to do. We're not as open to the public as we could be or should be, from paying a bill, getting a permit, doing some of the daily interactions the public has to do with us. And so I think those things, that functionality has to be included when you research this. Figure out the building, figure out those functions that you want to, how you want to service the public, then figure out who goes in what office.
It's a great point.
Sorry.
Jessica.
Yeah, no, and I would agree. There is nothing special about the office it's just an office in there. You can put me there or not put me there and still proceed with a renovation if you want. What I was actually going to say is that I think the fire department is a really good example to address what you're possibly concerned about if you look at Station 81 and 82, because all of the fire station administration is in 81. None of them are in 82. And I think you do a really good job of, I don't think that impacts your operations in the least. So, if it was required that we physically work alongside our department head every single day, we have a bigger problem. We really do. And because we are also spread out, and because, there are many people in the town who do remote working and things like that. We have so many systems in place to stay in touch. I mean, there is not, Cindy and I may not physically see each other for a few days, but there's never a day that goes by that we're not talking all day long. We had a video chat earlier today. I mean, we have so many mechanisms in place for staying in touch. And that's on Mike and me, you know, and to an extent Reagan with the directors that he works with. So,
It's an age-old problem, and it is only further and further exacerbated with the growth. I agree with you entirely about the small village concept. The challenge is for years, and it's more and more true, we are attempting to provide oftentimes urban, but certainly big city, and I use that with quotes for North Carolina, services within an urban or within a rural village, multiple structure setting.
Right.
That's always been an operational challenge. I mean, the amount of paperwork that goes back and forth across the tracks downtown that Taylor talked about, it's mind-blowing sometimes. And we've tried and continue to move in the direction of a lot of automation and those types of things. But sometimes you just got to have a face-to-face or a handoff of something. It's never been efficient.
some of that is because Mike and I are involved in a lot of the hiring or personnel decisions that go on with our departments. So not being with HR, you know, I mean, it's just, if you start considering all the different ways we're in things, I mean, there are a lot of efficiencies.
Yeah, whether all of administration ends up in this building or not, there has been a lot of thought given to, much like when the community development building was done. You know, that building needed to be done, hadn't been touched since the police sort of were temporarily in it while this was being built.
yeah.
But it was done around the idea of, okay, in the development community, and that ranges from home builder all the way up to somebody with an idea on the back of a napkin, we tried to get everything into that building, that whether it be engineering inspections, building inspections, planning, it has become a one-stop shop for sort of that side of the operation. Part of the thought process behind the rework on this plan was finance, billing, human resources, sort of a lot of the back office stuff that we're running back and forth across the tracks and different things, just trying to get people located into one place. So where administrators end up in large part is really a function of just where is there an open office? Because as far as just getting the day-to-day stuff done, we are trying to get those individuals in the same geographic location.
Does it make sense to isolate the administration all in the current administration building and?
Could it be done? Yes. Do I think I would spend every bit as much time running back and forth across the tracks, not only to see Tess, but then also Bruce across the street? More, just because I'm involved in a lot of that, the longer term human resource stuff and conversations around that. So, yes, it could be done.
What do you value more? Do you value having the administration as a unit, or do you value being in the finance building more as the town manager?
I think before we get too far into the weeds on where everybody's going to go,
I'd really be interested in that question
All right.
being answered. Thanks.
Reagan, go for it. I'm not sure where it leads in a decision that we're trying to come up with today. I mean, I see the value of the conversation happening, but I almost feel like let's figure out if there's an option for where everyone's going before we try to cram everybody into the tiny building on the park so admin can all be in one building.
Well, I just am interested in what Reagan as town manager values the most.
I value having a full leadership team to carry out the day-to-day. I mean, if you're going to ask me to prioritize offices that I would like to have the most immediate access to, it's going to be human resource and finance.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
That's
With council's approval, what I would like to see is something beyond the $3 to $4 million Band-Aid.
Yeah, correct. I mean, spending $5 million which so far I've just heard really is going to meet current needs. Kind of it. Nothing forward looking is a big price to ask. So if we're going to do anything of substance, see what maybe for more forward looking than just fixing current needs. Now, aren't there some offices? I mean, if y'all had one or two spots that had to have somewhere to go, there's empty offices in finance currently, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of empty offices we can backfill there. We've avoided doing so until we start to move in some direction on this, because we don't want to move somebody in and then 6 months later necessarily be moving them out for construction purposes. And again, particularly with that finance building and particularly even with the admin building, there's work that needs to be done to these, whether we do anything to create space internally. The roof on the admin building is going to need some TLC sooner than later.
And it's a slate roof. Yeah,
Correct.
That's going to be expensive. The roof is not quoted in this $1 million.
That should include
It is?
a
Okay.
roof replacement, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oof.
It's actually probably a good-sized portion of that, because, I mean, there's only so much internal space to move walls around in that building.
Well,
So,
the basement was a big number too.
and that was sort of the alternate or additional.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
But if you've been in that basement, that's,
I saw the pictures. I don't
I was
want
gonna
to
say, it's starting from being dug out. There's nothing else finished about it.
That's, okay, so that's why you're coming up with 5 million with the addition of basements, yeah. Yeah, I think if we can, I mean, I'm open to the council members all having the conversation with staff as well, or visiting the buildings and, I don't know, trying to come up with some ideas of what you all think may work, but I think I'd be interested in looking at what's a real solution to making staff efficient, meeting the needs of our citizens, and finding a solution that's more than just a quick Band-Aid that we're going to need to do again.
And has room to run.
And I could only name 13 buildings. Sitting here writing them down. So now I'm going to have to check that list with somebody.
Did you name this one?
Yes. Yep.
And also, I guess, just what other buildings potentially may work and aren't being utilized for less cost. I mean, I don't know what's going on at Whitehall. I know we're still exploring that, but that's a lot of space that we own. But I know that also would mean if anybody goes in there to public capacity, you'd have to do some upfits and fills. So you keep running into the same problem, but if there's some more efficient options, maybe.
We've kicked that around a little bit, particularly in conversation around temporary housing if construction is taking place. Long-term, it's a pretty remote location. Beyond, depending on the departments you would put in there, it not necessarily jibing with everything else that we're attempting to do out there. It's pretty remote.
Parking being an issue. Okay. Thank you both. Thank you, Reagan. And Jessica, you want to stay up here and talk to us about the resources for homelessness?
Quick question on that. So the direction I feel like we gave was to explore the options in the admin building, the finance building structurally on.
Yeah, see what more we can kind of get with CPL, and also
Right,
maybe
okay.
look at a price of doing the structural analysis to.
That's good.
Okay. So moving on to homelessness and working with our community members in need. We had a really busy council meeting this month. So Cliff Brown from Teamworks was also at that council meeting and asked that the town support him and his organization in some way. And so the mayor requested that we put this topic on today's agenda to have further discussion. So what I wanted to do, Gerald and I have spent a good bit of time together over the past month, just deep diving this issue a little bit more to help you understand the status quo and potential options going forward. One thing that we've done is tried to get some accurate data on how many homeless people might be in our community. And it's hard to narrow it down to Southern Pines specific because any of the counts that are done on a countywide level. But the most recent data that we've gotten from is from the 2023, what they call it the PIT count, which is point in time. And that's something that's done across the country on a single night in January. And so the PIT count that we have from last year was 46 people total in all of Moore County. 24 of those were unsheltered, which means that they might have been in an encampment. They might have been living in a vehicle, not a, kind of approved structure that's habitable. And then 22 of those people were in some type of shelter or transitional housing. While they've completed the PIT count for this year, we haven't received that data. Gerald also had a good conversation with Tambra Chamberlain from the school system and talked to her, and she was also present last month. And she also estimates that there's 112 students that are doubled up. And so that means that for some reason, these families might be living with other family members. They might be living with friends, probably because of some type of crisis and not necessarily that that's their chosen kind of family model. So that's 112 students. And those are not counted in the PIT. We also looked at what types of organizations and facilities are currently serving this population in the county. We're aware of Tambra Place, Family Promise. The coalition does a lot of work in this area, although they don't have a shelter per se. Camp Duncan and the Cameron Boys Camp are both facilities that serve youth, and they are exploring opportunities to build longer-term homes for potentially homeless youth. We also looked at whether there are unsheltered homeless people in Southern Pines, and of course, that could possibly change by the night, but we looked at whether there are encampments. And as of this time, none of our staff are aware of any actual encampments in Southern Pines. We do know that there are some close. There are some in Aberdeen, kind of behind the Walmart, but they're not actually in Southern Pines jurisdiction. And I talked to a few different departments about that, fire, police, and even some of our public works who are regularly out in the community. So if there's an encampment that's within the town limits, we're not currently aware of where that would be.
Jessica, 1 second. On the PIT count for Moore County, is where it says there was 46, 24 unsheltered and 22 sheltered. There's not a breakdown of if any of those are kids, are there? Is there?
There is a breakdown. I feel like we didn't have, actually, I can probably pull that information up real quick. Remembering off the top of my head, I feel like there were not, but
Or not?
but I do have that broken down. Oh, actually, it's in a spreadsheet. Can I get back to you
that's
on that?
fine.
Would that be
Yeah,
okay?
I don't want to slow it up.
I've got it. Give me just a second.
Okay, thank you, Gerald.
Let me get my reading glasses.
So the next area that I wanted to focus on a little bit for your consideration is where funding comes from for serving the homeless and other community members in need, and who in North Carolina has responsibility for this. And in our state, the role of human and social services is expressly assigned to the county governments. And this is in the state statutes, and it's been that way for about a century. And so what that means is that any federal money that comes to North Carolina goes to the state, and then they send it out to the counties. So the towns and the other municipalities are not going to receive any direct funding, nor do we really even have authority to kind of manage those types of services. There's a lot of details in the state statutes on how that's handled. And for example, when you're serving human and social services, you have to have specific types of boards, whether it's a human services board, a county board of commissioners can oversee those types of services, but a municipal governing board like a town council is not given oversight authority for those types of services. So there's a pretty clear distinction in North Carolina in terms of who not only has responsibility, but who receives financing assistance. So any assistance that we would provide would be just from our local funds, our revenues that we take in. And, you know, it's also worth noting that because all of our citizens pay county property taxes, we do pay money to the county to carry out these services for all of Moore County. And I think that's very strategic because it's hard to isolate those different types of services to jurisdictions. So it's much more efficient to serve the entire county.
To answer the question, so, two different categories.
You want to come up here so you can be on the microphone?
Please do.
Here. Oh, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
It's always dangerous to give me a microphone, but, so two categories. One is, families with children, so a family unit, and the children under 17 in that category are 3. And then the other category is children without guardians experiencing homelessness, and that is 0. So that, again, 2023 PIT count. The PIT count, industry standard, people working in homelessness say double that number because you can't always find them. They don't always want to be found necessarily. So, that's kind of the formula for, how many do you really have?
The kids under 17 are a part, there's 3, and they're a part of a family unit.
Yes, sir. Now, family unit can be parent and 1 child, 2 parents and 2 children, right? So there's no, are all 3 in the same household? We don't know that from the PIT count.
Thank you for having that.
You're welcome.
The next area that I wanted to highlight a little bit is the ways that the town does currently provide assistance to community members in need, because we actually do a lot of work and provide a lot of resources, especially considering that under state law, we're not really required to. And a lot of these are public-private partnerships that we have. One of our longest standing ones is our partnership with the Sandhills Moore Coalition for Human Care. If you're not familiar, we own the 2 buildings that they are located in, and we lease those to them for $1 a year. And actually, that lease comes up next year, so you'll be seeing that lease come through soon. So obviously, that is a very favorable partnership that allows them to help with their mission. We also partner with the Boys and Girls Club of the Sandhills, and we lease half of the recreation center to them at no cost, although they do have the ability to use the greater building. And, their role in helping the community in need, they have very affordable after-school care, summer camps, and then they also have youth activities as well. One that I don't know that a lot of people thought about, but I thought it's worth pointing out, is the support that we give to the Moore County Farmers Market. They, at certain times of the year have 2 markets here a week, but at least on a weekly basis, they use our Armory Park facility. And we do not charge them a fee for doing that. And I think that's a great way of addressing food scarcity. And if you're familiar with that, their prices are very, very reasonable to get fresh foods here to our community. And those markets are within walking distance of a lot of our community members. Our Parks and Recreation program, we also have after-school programs and summer camps. And I think if you compared us to some of the private offerings, you'd find that we're probably far more affordable. We're not quite as affordable as the Boys and Girls Club, but we stay at 100% capacity at all times with wait lists. So I think that's a great way that we serve our community.
You may not know this. Cindy left. She'd be the one to ask. How much is that Parks and Rec scholarship fund utilized when kids are applying that have no funds to pay?
I would have to ask her. I'm not sure.
The 100% 100% field capacity? Is that because of staffing or because of facility? Like, why can't it, if it's 100% continually and there's a wait list?
Sure. It's a little bit of both. I
Okay.
mean, obviously, we're at the capacity that we feel we can staff. And some of that, we have to project how many, especially for summer camps, how many counselors do we feel comfortable that we can hire by the summer. But some of it is facility space also. Our library has a variety, they have a really big offering of resources that they serve to the community. And one in particular that I want to highlight, Cliff Brown had talked to Amanda Brown, no relation there, about opportunities for the library to provide services. And one thing he mentioned is that it can be hard for homeless people and other people in need to get internet access. And so hearing that, Amanda took steps to eliminate the need to have a library card, which, if you're homeless, there can be barriers to getting a library card. And so we now provide access to free internet. We also give tokens for internet usage to different nonprofits. And we have a variety of homeless people that, regularly use our library, not only as a place to, on a day like this, just get out of the weather, but they use the computers. And we also have a lot of resources to help with job applications and resume building. And we have a whole host of different programs. I couldn't even do it justice. But another really nice thing that they do is they have a really comprehensive resource guide for anyone who is looking for what is available in Moore County, our library hosts that. And then lastly, it's small, but I think it's kind of neat. We have a canine cubby at Martin Dog Park, which is like a food pantry, but it's for pet owners in need where they can get access to donated pet supplies. So my recommendations at this point, I don't know how familiar you are with the civil affairs program that the military has, but there was actually a gentleman from the civil affairs program from Fort Liberty who happened to be at that January meeting. And he reached out to me the next day because we have partnered together on other things. And he's in charge of a program they have called Operation Slush Tiller. And this is kind of the culmination of their civil affairs program. And they need community partners, and essentially they have military simulations where they try to use their education and training to solve real world problems. So they ask for partners like the town to work with them, and we've worked with them in the past, as have a lot of the other local governments. So the reason he contacted me is because they helped Richmond County with this exact same question recently, and it was really helpful to the county. And what they did was they spent their resources really diving in and understanding what resources are available in Richmond County, where there might be resource gaps, and then they were able to give some educated recommendations back to the county that they found really useful. So Gerald and I met with them about a week ago, and we are already confirmed. We're scheduled with them. They're going to come the last weekend of March and then the first weekend of April. That's how they do it. They do it over 2 different weekends. And so they are going to study this issue for us, which is wonderful because they have a lot of resources that won't require staff to spend a lot of time working on. And so I would like to request that we perhaps pause this conversation and any discussions and see what recommendations they bring back to us. As part of their project, they do a Monday report out. So I can invite you all to that report out where you're able to hear it firsthand and ask them questions. We'll also get a written report that I can provide, and I'll also be inviting you to meet with this group, and they can ask you questions and you can give them some insights as well. So you'll have the ability to engage with this process.
Is that Easter weekend?
The first weekend is Easter weekend, and we're not going to be asking you to work with them that weekend. So we have some other ideas in place. And unfortunately, their timing is not flexible. That gets scheduled out far in advance. So Gerald and I will be coming in on Easter weekend to work with them.
Do you see any benefit to expanding this to include Aberdeen or Pinehurst to be a part of this Operation Slush Tiller? Because I don't know if they have efforts like Southern Pines has, but it's an issue
Sure.
broader than here.
Yeah, we could definitely, that's a good idea. And we could definitely
Yeah.
invite their town officials, town staff to be part of that. We are going to be inviting the broader community organizations that serve the entire county to be involved in this. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth
Okay.
bringing them to the table if they want to join us.
Yeah, I think by definition, that any data and findings they have are going to go beyond
Yeah,
borders
exactly.
clearly, so.
Jessica, you mentioned the Fill the Frege stocking efforts that went in this past summer. The actual Frege itself, is it paid for by the town or the coalition?
No, my understanding is that it was kind of a community service project that was spearheaded by some teens. And I understand that they donated the fridge and then they built the structure that surrounds it. So the coalition would pay for the power that serves it, but we don't have any responsibility for actually maintaining it. And so, yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up because that was a project that our staff spearheaded, understanding that the summer months can be challenging for youth who are not in school and don't get school meals. So our town departments filled the Frege all weeks of the summer.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah,
Just
it
for
was.
that. Go ahead.
So I have one more question, again, on the lines of the Operation Slush Tiller. So we mentioned 3 kids that are homeless. Does the school system provide a way for those kids to get to school?
Gerald, did you learn anything about that with your conversation?
So, yes, they have a, I want to characterize it as a minibus, but they have
A transportation.
Get those kids to school.
So it'd be nice to know that too as a part of this study, to identify that shortfall, if in fact it is a shortfall, but it's not something that we have on our list, but could
Right.
be.
So the first weekend of the OST, which they made up a nice little acronym. It's actually officer situational training. And then they put an operational name to it because they're civil affairs guys. They're going to do that. But the first weekend, what we're looking to do is have people like Cliff Brown and Tambra and others scope the problem for them and talk about what resources the community widely has. And then the second weekend, as Jessica mentioned, would be more of the kind of key leader engagements these civil affairs officers would do deployed, right? They're going to meet with a local mayor or a sheikh or a, imam and, talk to leaders in the community as well as, their own intelligence gathering with just normal people in the community to figure out problems to solve. So we're going to build both ends. So you'll be that second weekend, we'll make opportunities, but that first weekend, they'll really get to understand, who's who in the zoo to be able to figure out how big really is this problem.
I had a couple questions about following up with Teamworks, but then Mike just walked out. Do you want to wait until he gets back or do you want to try to address them?
I can try to address them.
Okay. So it was mentioned in the paper that he'd come to us, which he told us 3 times, and then that he was asking for something. Was there ever a direct ask? And do we know what they want, what he wanted specifically?
So I actually went back and listened to the meetings where he had attended, since they are recorded. The first time that he attended was August of last summer. And that was at our invitation to just let you all, inform you all of the services that are available. And let me pull up my notes on that. At that time, his kind of ask, quote unquote, was pretty general. He talked to you about the fact that at that time, Teamworks took clothing donations and different things like that, hosted events and kind of asked that, if you all were able, that you could be part of that. I just pulled up my notes here. So yeah, that was kind of the extent of his request there. He then came on September the 12th, 2023, and spoke during public comments. And at that time, he asked that the town establish a homelessness task force to work with TeamWorks. Mike can talk a little bit more about this, but we are aware, we've since learned since last month, that the county has actually formed a homelessness task force. And we also understand that that task force provides financial contributions to TeamWorks. I believe this fiscal year, it's $36,000. Also in that meeting, he stated that it takes roughly $30,000 over 6 months to stabilize the existing homeless population. And then he last came to us on January 23rd, 24, and his request at that time was essentially land, but it was unclear to any of us what land he might be talking about.
And do we know, I think my biggest concerns, besides the fact that this is something that there's money already available at the county level, my concerns would be financial accountability. If we're spending taxpayer money on anything, I would like for it to be really clear where it's going and how it's making a difference. Was he able to provide the town any financial background or records of how he's using the money from the county?
We have not asked for that, and that would be our recommendation, as if you were interested in exploring some type of formal partnership with him, that we get a better understanding of that and review audits and, nonprofit organizations. They have, certain returns that they file with the IRS. And so I think we would need to better understand that and, consider some parameters if we wanted to do something, but we haven't gone to that step yet.
And so then the other question I guess that brings me to is the scope of TeamWorks, the area that he's serving. In the January presentation, it made it sound very much like they're all here, which, we're hearing that they're not necessarily here, which is fine. Like our borders are
Yeah,
unclear.
absolutely.
But is he doing all of his work near Southern Pines or in Moore County, or is there?
So my understanding is that he serves all of Moore County. I think because of the fact that his physical office is located in Southern Pines, it's on the campus of Trinity AME Zion Church, that brings homeless people to his facility to get certain services. I do know in conversations that I've had with him that he does go out to the encampments. I know there are certain hotels in the area that he puts people in, so I know that he goes to those campuses. He did state to us that they are no longer going to be accepting clothing donations, and I understand that he took all of the clothing that he had on hand at that point to Richmond County, I believe.
The coalition also provides clothing, right? So there's
The
like some
coalition does.
duplicative efforts there. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I think that the path forward that you're recommending sounds like a good direction for us to get more information.
Thanks for looking into it. as
Sure.
much as you did.
You're welcome. No, we've learned a lot, so
Yeah.
hope it's helpful, at least at this point, to you.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, you're going to get a break.
All right, the Bennett Street Sidewalk Project. Is that you, Reagan?
Yep. Skip.
Oh, did I skip one?
Let's see.
Sorry, I just went straight over that erosion. All right. Chapter 154. James, we're so glad to have you. Let's talk erosion.
Okay. Sure, I'm turned on here. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Before I jump into it, I do want to introduce this gentleman over here in the back corner. This is David Bird. He is one of the town's engineering techs, very heavily involved in a lot of site development reviews and has a special focus on a lot of the erosion control program. So he actually did the yeoman's work on a lot of this. So there's a lot of changes in the document. If you've looked through it, you see there's a lot of red. A lot of that is really administrative. There is a local model ordinance that the state updates every now and again with the general concept that all of the local programs substantially, meet that local ordinance. It doesn't have to be the exact same, but it needs to be substantially about the same. We are allowed to have things that are more restrictive, but it's kind of, this is like your baseline. So a lot of what is in here is just getting the town's ordinance caught up to match what that local ordinance says. And usually the changes to the local ordinance are just clarifications, adding definitions. Every now and again, general statute will change. That can drive, some additional language to be added. But, at the end of the day, they don't have a significant impact on the actual functioning of the ordinance and how staff goes about it. There are 4 things I really want to bring to this body's attention that are staff initiated that really do have an impact. So BJ, if you do me a favor and jump to page, you've got the entire packet, not the individual.
What section?
Yeah. Well, it's page 8 of 32 on what I'm looking at. So that will bring you to 154.04.
Actually, where you're at now.
Yep.
130.
Thank you, Bill. So if you want to go to the next page, please. So that bottom paragraph, you'll see in the blue, historically, the town's trigger for when you had to get a erosion control permit from the town was 30,000 square feet. That goes back to the early 2000s when, and Reagan can probably speak to this better, but it was really intended to be something to help capture and keep an eye on residential home building, ensuring that we're regulating not just big sites that of course have your obvious impacts, but a lot of little sites together can be equally impactful. We're proposing to change that back to 1 acre because that matches with what the state requires. And not that we're necessarily lessening requirements, but due to the advance in the town's technology and the use of our SmartGov permitting program, it's much easier for the town to track residential home building now. It used to be, building inspections was in a different building, the engineering department was in a different building, not everybody's communicating, so this was kind of put in place as a way for the engineering department at the time to be able to track those things. Well, now I can log in and see at any given time what those building permits are, where they are. So we feel from a tracking perspective, that's not really a necessary requirement.
It's my ignorant question, not knowing the ins and outs of this like you guys do. So that doesn't necessarily mean a single-family home gets to ignore all the erosion control measures. It
We're
just
coming to
means
that.
they don't have to do this formal plan with you.
Correct.
Okay.
But we're coming to that.
All right.
That was actually the next thing I wanted to talk about. BJ, if you can skip down 2 pages.
And as he gets there, James is correct. The change that was made in the early 2000s was when a lot of the infill development really began in some of the older neighborhoods, and inevitably they were on lots that weren't developed initially for reason. So there were a couple of pools that got filled with mud and horror stories that lead to those types of changes.
Yeah. So with that, even with being required to get a permit, it was kind of a watered down permit. It's still a small site. You're not in there designing engineered sedimentation basins and things like that for a 10,000 square foot lot. So what that permit did is basically define what are your basic erosion control objectives. You got to put a construction entrance in. You've got to have silt fence on the lower edges of your property to capture things. And you need to be keeping up with ground stabilization. Those are kind of your basic premises. So what we've kind of modified in here is we've deleted a section that talks about what we call an erosion compliance permit. And we've basically just said, if your building is less than an acre site, you still have to meet all of those same written requirements. That doesn't go away. You're just not filling out a piece of paperwork ahead of time that says you're going to do it. And our plan with that, because we want to account and make sure that we're not forgetting about new builders coming into town that may not know this is a thing, they're not used to it. When you get a building permit, you're going to get an additional document with that permit that states, even though you didn't get an erosion control permit, you still have to follow these mandatory requirements. It doesn't lessen the regulatory burden. It doesn't make it harder for the town to enforce it. We're just trying to cut out some of the paperwork. So.
If I could speak to that just for a moment, just to give some perspective. One of the reasons why we wanted to make the compliance change is pretty much anything outside of like single-family home construction, like if you wanted to say build a deck or put a patio in your backyard, you still had to go through the permit process. And that was just really clunky for everybody, the citizens and for us, because we're over here like, I'm trying to inspect, giant acre tracts or keep up with all the subdivisions we've got. And now I've got somebody complaining that, I'm just trying to put a patio in my backyard. Why do I need to come to you in the first place? So that's one of the reasons why we made this change. But as to speak to James, like enforcement wise, we're still doing the same thing. So, as I kind of do a lot of the inspections as well, along with our construction inspector. So we're still able to go anywhere in town and still enforce, hey, you don't have this, hey, you're causing that. It just changes the paperwork side of it, not the enforcement side.
Yes, that is a great point, that per the literal reading of the formal ordinance, if you are putting a post in the ground, you're technically, we're supposed to get a permit. So that goes away now. BJ, if you could jump 15 pages for me, so that'll put you to one. Moved on. Go one more. What's the section number? 154.15. There you've gone. It's the plan appeal section. 147. There you go. So this is a change here, plan appeals. Previously, this ordinance language was written that any appeals of the decision from, the people administering the erosion control program were to be appealed to Reagan. That's not really the best way to go about it. And I don't know that it's technically correct either. The appeals process requires, appropriate notifications. So just picking up the phone and calling Reagan doesn't really meet that requirement. So we've changed that to be like most of our other appeals and reference them to the Board of Adjustment in accordance with the UDO section there. To date, I'm not aware of anybody having ever appealed any erosion control decisions. So, all right. And then the last one I want to point out, that's 6 pages down, BJ. Kind of the last section there, criminal penalties. Some of you might remember a couple of years ago, there were some changes in general statute that decriminalized a lot of town ordinances. So we made a mass change to a lot of ordinances to decriminalize them. Turns out we should not have done that with the erosion control program. That is actually still a criminal penalty or criminal act in accordance with general statute. So we're just changing that back. So with that, those are, like I said, those are really the high points of the changes here. I'm happy to answer any questions or just go into detail of anything else.
So I like what you're doing. David, hats off to you. Question for both of you. Why have we capitalized person?
That's the only reason that comes directly from the state. So like the model ordinance we included, like that was one of the updates they made is they wanted to capitalize person.
So
I was like, it's also in our UDO that if it's capitalized, it's definitely.
I was going to say, yes, a person is,
Might be an individual, but it could be an LLC.
yeah, if you look at the definition
So
sections.
the
there is-
definition makes it a proper noun? Is that what's happening?
Well, it's my understanding in the codex or whatever of writing ordinances in legal language, when you are referencing a word specifically defined, you're supposed to capitalize it.
Defined.
I'm looking at Mac, and I don't think he's paying attention to us.
Is Mac, are you?
Has Mac read this?
Mac, do you agree with that? That person should be capitalized? Or are you just doing? Right, I understand that. But if the state's done it wrong, I'd be interested in us not doing it wrong, but,
We discussed in our UDO that we're specifically capitalizing things that have a definition. I think it would make sense to follow.
Yeah, and I just came across that recently, actually. That's relatively new to me, and I did check in with Mac on that and the policy, and same with other entities. And yes, if you have a term that is defined in your ordinance, you should
capitalize it all the way through.
So that therefore it sends the signal that, and actually it's really helpful now that I know that.
Yeah.
So when I come across a word in the UDO that's capitalized, I go, hey, it's like a little. code.
So
I know that.
when neighborhood
Wow.
comes up again, we will know if neighborhood's capitalized or not, if there's a definition.
I bet there's a definition of person somewhere.
There
There
is
is.
in this,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. David, thank you for all your
Person
work.
can be an entity.
This is painful what you
And
I
did.
think that's the key. So you don't just read it and think, I'm company X, I'm not.
I'm not a person.
I'm not a person. Okay. All right, well, in honor of Company X, I support the capital person.
There were all the changes and was good with them. Does Mac look over these things?
Just the English teacher in me can't quite take it, but that's okay. Right.
Okay.
And what's our next steps for adoption and approval of this? Is that after a public hearing at the next meeting, or what's our next phase?
I'm not aware of any specific requirements, since this is just a code of ordinance change.
Yeah,
That's not
the
going to
the only thing I want to double check is because there is a change from civic back to criminal. I know the institution of criminal penalty has some requirements around it, and I asked Mac just to look into that.
Okay.
So,
I think we all feel comfortable with it. Just let us know how and where and when to approve it.
Proceed.
be able to say, as you saw at the work session and discussed in February.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions?
I think David gets a shout out for editing the most boring thing you could have possibly edited, so thank you for that. Well done.
I appreciate that, but honestly, I was just happy to, I also am in charge of approving all of the permits we get for erosion, which is pretty much any permit we get ever, because it's part of the building permit. So whether you're getting a building permit for an addition, a house, commercial building, whatever, I look at all of that. So I was very, very happy to be like, oh darn, I don't have to look at like 50% of what I'm seeing right now.
Efficiency of
Really
paperwork.
nice.
Be careful laying down a challenge about the most boring, because there's some
Okay.
pretty mundane stuff we could be bringing
Well,
in here.
I have spent some time in the finance department lately, you're right, all right. All right, well, you
I
can.
think we
you can
equally
correct me.
appreciate the
Thank
efficiency
you.
of paperwork. So, thank you. All right, James, you gonna stay and talk about sidewalks? Yep. Very good. Thank you.
Yes, you can. All right, so Bennett Street, we are continuing to move along with the plan to get sidewalks basically from Morganton Road into town. We're doing that block by block at the current rates that we've been funding the projects for the last couple of years. But this year, we have bid out the project. This is essentially for one block on, put sidewalk on one side of Bennett Street from between Wisconsin and Illinois. There's already sidewalk on one side, but due to the fact there's a pretty good ditch on the side of the road, and we're having to pipe that to be able to put the sidewalk in, the cost for the sidewalk in this particular block is expensive. It's been more than any of the other blocks that we've approached so far. So we kind of knew the budget was going to be tight, but we felt it'd be better to get it bid out, get real numbers, and then be able to approach council and kind of discuss some options about how we want to move forward. So you're a block down, BJ. No, you're looking the right direction, just go up a block. So we bid this out three components. One component is a water line replacement. That's fully funded from a different fund, so we're not really talking about that aspect of it.
And
One more block, sorry. Yeah, this all,
there's already a sidewalk there, right?
yeah, actually,
It's new. Okay.
there's actually some pictures in the packet, BJ.
BJ will be there watching.
This block won't surprise you.
I wouldn't say that, Reagan. We actually have looked at next 2 years' projects. They have similar stormwater needs.
This is a water, source looking
What?
water line realignment versus the stormwater realignment.
No, there's both. There's both. Yeah, I'm just saying that this particular project has a potable water component. Yeah, but from a budget standpoint, you know, that part's covered. So what we looked at, and we got 3 bids, the information's in the packet, but our low bidder was $190,000 to get the curb and gutter, the stormwater, and the sidewalk just on the right-hand side of the screen here that BJ's driving down. So that is in of itself about $15,000 short of what is currently available in the sidewalk fund. That is an option. There's currently about $30,000 in interest. That's kind of a separate part of that fund. That could be moved in to cover that cost if that's all we wanted to do is just take care of this one side. Now, if you look at every other block from here back into town, you'll notice there's curb and gutter on both sides of the road. Even though the sidewalk is already on the brownstone side, we thought it would be best to go ahead and make everything uniform and look the same. So we bid out a second piece of the project, which was about $62,000 to get curb and gutter put in on what is now the way BJ's facing, the right side of the street. That, again, just compounds the budget issue we have with just doing the one side. So we kind of wanted to put this in front of this body, have the discussion, and kind of see, is there a preference or an idea, you know, if this body wants to spend the money to do those things. You know, do you want to move the money, do a budget transfer, would generally have to come out of the general fund to go ahead and fund the whole project.
Just out of curiosity, what is $200,000? How many blocks does $200,000 get you in a non-water line?
Previously, that would have gotten us, I hate using the term block because I say a block, but.
Feet,
Yeah, so feet's more 800 feet. That's basically one side
almost
of
2
each block.
blocks. Right,
Well, no, it's 800 feet of sidewalk, 400 feet each side.
right,
So,
okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
so $200,000 normally would have got us a full block, both sides of the road.
You say normally, though, it's been a few years since that was,
Well, every year it's getting,
scenario where there's already curbs.
yeah, I mean, some blocks already had some infrastructure in place, some had stormwater, some had curb. But now we're at a point where there's nothing.
May I put in a plug really quick for something in the UDO that is really directly related to this? We have in our comp plan.
Probably should do it on the mic.
Oh, sorry.
You probably should put in your plug on the mic, yeah.
While we're talking cost and sidewalk, we actually have in the comp plan, and it's a text amendment that's on the list, is to amend the UDO to require that commercial development do sidewalk adjacent to their own commercial development to make sure that we don't have to come along later and pay for it. And so just wanted to put in that plug because right now we're sitting here and our brains are thinking, holy cow, $200,000 for 800 feet of sidewalk, holy smokes. But when you have a corner, say corner commercial development, it's very standard across jurisdictions that they put in sidewalk just adjacent to their, not down the road, but you know, just adjacent to their development. We don't actually currently have that requirement in the UDO.
Property that's been approved and a right-of-way has been given away by the town, right?
I think it's on the other side.
Over here?
Yeah, so that corner he's facing, that's the townhomes on Bennett project.
If you come up to the,
right
if you
there.
come up to the dry cleaners, yeah. Yeah.
Sidewalks being put in as part of that development.
I want to put that plug
I
in
don't
there
think we're
because
on the
when
same
we look at the
development.
price of
That's okay.
sidewalks, and actually, it's very abnormal to not require sidewalks to be
That's
constructed
not what I'm
adjacent to
talking about
commercial
right there.
development, and we don't require it. So.
We had, I know we had it in residential because I remember we would get approached, hey, I'm building some homes in a neighborhood that never had them, and they would ask for waiver of that requirement. So has it been in the residential
That's when it's
side?
that's when you're subdividing. So when you're subdividing, you're
Okay.
building a street, we have a requirement that you meet our cross-section, and our cross-section includes sidewalks. There are a number of circumstances where we do require sidewalks, but there's one significant circumstance where we don't require it, which is normal piece of property, normal commercial development, you're putting in access, you're putting in parking, you're putting in landscaping, you're putting in lighting, you're putting in all this stuff. Normal would be to put in a sidewalk, and we don't require that. It's on our list, so when it comes up later, you just think back to this moment of how much it costs. That's why I had to put in that plug right now. Thank you.
So for the portion on the left, the left photo, the left side of it, where there's no development there, at some point, if someone came in and developed, they would put the sidewalks in.
Left picture, left side. Yes, I've had some inquiries about that property recently, but that property, I would not hold out waiting for development of that property. It's.
They would have the flexibility, though, to move the sidewalk outside of the right-of-way with an easement to the town to maybe avoid some of those conflicts, too,
Certainly.
right? So we don't have that flexibility, but they could. Right. And so what I was going to ask is, has any thought been given to having a crosswalk down there at the next block and then bring it and just leave this block out for a while and then use that, program that money somewhere else?
Kind of, there is sidewalk.
Yeah.
Involve crossing street.
But it's at a pretty long, it's not like a hill, it's not blind, it's not a blind crossing there.
And I don't know how many people are going to walk between the school and the dry cleaner. Is it terrible? I mean, I know we want connected sidewalks, but I don't feel like there's no residential right there. It would be more common for the people to be walking on the opposite side.
Well, the real connection we're driving for is once you get closer to Morganton Road, you're connecting the sidewalk that's adjacent to the town park.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So the crosswalk is like, nobody wants to do that because of the traffic, maybe? Or it just hasn't been really considered?
Not at this particular location. Now, the concept you're proposing is not unlike what we've done. I forget which block that is. Is it Indiana, where the potential hotel was being talked about? It's, no, this is, but that corner parcel, it was hot and heavy being talked about being redeveloped. We did not put sidewalk in there. We skipped that block.
Yeah.
But again, that thing is completely surrounded by sidewalks. You're not really being left with a big gap. As I sit here and I think about this, Brandon, because I hadn't really thought about it before, but that intersection at Wisconsin is not the best intersection.
Slope, the hill?
Yeah, well, it's just an odd angle because you're coming from a thin right of way and then dropping down. At one time, I think they actually had to cut the top of this hill off many, many years ago to kind of lower the grade in the area because it was such a sight distance issue.
So I was talking about the next block down there.
Yeah, well,
Is that Wisconsin? That's not Wisconsin, right there. That's Indiana. So crossing there.
yeah, so we could put something there in easily, but if the idea is to get people to the park, you would get them up to Wisconsin and they would then have to cross back over and continue down.
Well, there's going to be a new sidewalk going on the other side of Wisconsin, right?
For a short distance, but that's the end of the sidewalk on that side. But BJ, if you could pull it.
It's already developed. If we extend it anymore, it's going to be
Well-
on.
That's the issue with that side. Once you cross Wisconsin, the right-of-way radically shifts.
Okay.
So basically, there is no real right-of-way on that side of the road, and all of the room is on the side of the road we're talking about here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for whatever reason, at some time in the past, right here, they went from 80-foot right-of-way to 60-foot.
This was the original plat boundary.
Yeah.
Right here, it literally cuts right here was the original, and then it was up until about 40 years later, they stitched on additional land down here.
So this
So-
side,
Yeah, it cuts right through, right here.
rotate, going the other way towards Morganton, and then go down to where the sidewalk's going to stop. The new
Yeah,
sidewalk
it's
coming in
all
right
the way
here?
past Turnberry.
So it's like right here?
No, keep going.
No, where the sidewalk stops for the development.
Oh, sorry, the new one being
It's kind of
present.
back
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it'll be stopped right where that tree line is.
So then right there would be another crosswalk.
No, we would not put a crosswalk in there. You want to avoid putting crosswalks mid-block. It's better to have
Okay.
them actually at the intersections.
I got you.
That's just ending it because that is the edge of the property and where all the residential development will be.
So go up to the next intersection behind us. If you were crossing blocks, that's where you're saying there's no room for
Yeah.
sidewalk on the left.
Yeah, everything on the left side of this screen, the right-of-way is basically where you're seeing the power poles.
Yeah.
Whereas on the right-hand side, it's just like it is on the other side, a good 20 feet off of the edge of pavement.
So crossing mid-block is just because of danger?
Yeah, again, people expect things to be happening at intersections.
Right.
So you add something that's in between them, it's just, it can be done safely. You can sign them, you can warn them, but we generally try to avoid having to do that if we can.
So like I remember on Midland Road where the Greenway ends, Southern Pines Greenway ends as it comes into Midland Road.
Mhm.
I remember at the time there was a discussion about crossing at Knoll Road was more dangerous than crossing Midland Road with a high visibility crossing. And I don't know the details as to why that was the case, but maybe there was just too much going on at Knoll Road, and maybe that wasn't even true. But
I can,
I remember the Mill Road discussion because there was discussion, ultimately that discussion moved down to, what's the little road just beyond the old doctor's?
Dr. Neal, yeah.
Neal, yeah, which always just kind of amazed me.
Yeah.
It seemed like, and I don't know if it's because of the concept of how much traffic was being foreseen at Mill
Right.
at the time, or I don't remember the details.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm
But it was-
familiar with what you're talking about.
And it was kind of a mid-block
Because
crossing.
the Dr. Neal thing never made a lot of sense.
Right.
to me, but
yeah, well, again, I wasn't around for those conversations, but what you'll see with the proposed project, the draft designs, we've seen some very, very preliminary ones. They actually bring it all the way down to Dr. Neal Road because that is the intersection with Palmer on the other side and make the crossing there and then go back a little ways to get to where the
Right.
end of the trail
Okay.
is. Trying to get away from that, again, mid-block crossing.
Yeah.
But back to Bennett Street.
What are y'all's thoughts on the sidewalk at Bennett?
You know, I like how Bennett is starting to look as that section's getting the curb and gutter and the sidewalks is looking very nice. I guess I would just hate to spend this money for that block. And I mean, I'm kind of thinking the project that we approved right there where you are, that Bennett by the noodle bar. I assume that whole sidewalk's going to get ripped out and replaced with that project, or will that not be touched, BJ?
Necessarily.
That's not part of it.
The New York place.
Oh, New York Place.
So I don't want to spend a lot of money like that and then have something come in one of these blocks and then like we just totally wasted because the developer's going to redo the sidewalk and have other amenities or whatever that they wanted or.
I shouldn't say for sure. I mean, it is definitely possible that in terms of getting the elbow room to get in there and do all the foundation work and everything that needs to be done in that close proximity to the edge of the road, it's possible. That's why.
I mean, and just because that block is between Illinois and Wisconsin, it's the only one with nothing on it right now. And so it's like we put it in and then somebody immediately comes in. It's like,
Yeah. It just seems like a lot of money for a block, though.
or fourth of a block.
I would be comfortable kicking it down the road, not literally, figuratively. Maybe we discuss it again in a year. I know it's just gonna get more expensive, but if there's a chance that a developer comes in who can put the sidewalk in more efficiently because they're developing on the land as well.
You're talking about down at the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't count on that. I've had some inquiries, but they're really, really not. This is just like, hey, what about this person has owned this land for a long time, and
Okay.
Is that all,
Residential or commercial in nature.
Not sure. Still kind of kicking the tires on maybe what the town, and I did actually have a conversation about what the plan would call for in that area, and there's been some renewed interest because of the new townhomes that are going in. So there's some activity and some momentum, some energy going on in this area. That's why I think what precipitated the renewed I think, if I may, there's certainly value to, if plan calls for the provision of sidewalks. If you have a block that has no sidewalk, you can put a sidewalk on one side.
Right.
And another block already has one sidewalk, and you can wait and see on that one. There's merit there, but ultimately the plan calls for sidewalks on both sides. So you don't have to switch, have pedestrians walking back and forth to access the sidewalk. And certainly you can see, it's like up north, you always tell where people walk by looking after a snowstorm. And here you can see the goat trails worn in where people do walk. And, for what it's worth, actually people walk a fair bit out here. One of my loops when I go out and walk is on here. And I actually see people more often than I would have thought walking just kind of awkwardly on the side of the ribbon asphalt.
So I missed the water line component. It's $350,000 for that block, not $250,000.
Well, again, that's not a fair assessment. We don't typically do water line replacements when we're doing the sidewalks. It's just this particular block has an odd circumstance where it's a 4-inch line between two fire hydrants. And it's an old cast iron line, so it just needs to be replaced.
It needs to be replaced anyway.
Yeah.
It's not as a result of necessarily the sidewalk.
Correct, yeah, this just.
I got you.
Looking forward and saying it's going to need to be replaced. Let's do it
Gotcha.
before we
I got you.
bring up a new sidewalk.
Yeah.
So if we punt on the sidewalk, does the water line get replaced?
I'd think about that. We could talk with the contractor, see if he's willing.
Questions, whether the water line bid is good without the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We can talk with the contractor, that our low bidder, see if he has interest in doing that.
They're vastly different. The water line replacement or moving, the bids.
Yeah, what you can see there is, one contractor does the work himself and the other two subcontracted out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, getting utility contractors is,
That was actually part, when James and I first talked about these bids coming in a little bit over budget, et cetera, we had one really good bid compared to others that happen to be in the market right now. That you've just picked up on it. And that it was sort of if we're going to do this section, and again, it's legitimate conversation to not do it, but if we're going to do it, the bid seemed like a very attractive one compared to that particular bidder maybe not being available or interested, and then we'd be talking about a whole lot more money.
The TED plan, I mean, isn't eventually the hope plan that all of Bennett, both sides would have this pedestrian access?
That's always been sort of
I mean-
the vision for Bennett. Now, again, it does get challenging when you get down into that smaller right-of-way section on one side. But there are age-old plans that show Bennett with sidewalk and sort of being that, I'll call it the parallel block to Broad Street. One of the, as you've watched some of the cottages switch over to little service things and offices and things, that I've always suggested that really helps to take some of the pressure off of our efforts on Broad Street itself to make sure that you continue with retail, restaurants, things that interest people. Nothing against attorneys or banks or real estate agents, but those are sort of destination stops that you're either going there or you're not, versus I think I just want to go downtown and walk around and see what's in the store windows and maybe grab lunch. So this at least provides, Bennett has, as part of its sort of renaissance, seems to be providing an outlet for, I want to be at downtown. I want to have my law office downtown. I want to have my real estate office downtown, but not necessarily having to be on Broad Street and taking up sort of that high foot traffic real estate.
But still able to walk up to Broad.
Exactly.
That's a critical component, is that pedestrian infrastructure to be on Bennett or to be on any of the, about 2 blocks off, but filter into Broad is a huge.
And unlike on the other side of the tracks where you get a very natural conflict between Ash Street and a residential area where people do still live, but you've got civic clubs and different things, Bennett, for the most part, has already converted or is very much in the process of.
How does the council feel about the sidewalks?
I mean, I'm just looking at it, if we think we're going to do it, I mean, just this one bid is so much more attractive, largely is the water line portion. But if it's not gonna get any cheaper if we're gonna do it.
I will offer this much, because we didn't think not doing the sidewalk would become part of the conversation necessarily. As James said, oh, no need to apologize at all, but as James said, there are interest dollars in the account. It's just a matter of appropriating them for that. That will get you the sidewalk. The item that really involves going outside of those interest dollars is if you wish to curb the opposite side of the street for purposes of consistency going down Bennett. Did I err in that in any way?
Yes, I was about to bring that up. So.
Where's that
Can
cost?
you show me the other areas it is curved?
Well, I don't. The 62,000.
This is now.
Number,
Yeah, it's,
Oh, yeah, okay.
that puts basically a ramp and then curbs that whole other side of the road.
Sidewalk, the one that's already there.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel?
I think we do the sidewalk.
And the curbing as well?
Nope. I think we hold on the curbing.
Is it going to be substantially more expensive to come back and try to curb later?
Probably.
I feel like this is one of those like economies of scale that you
general,
just
I was
gotta
gonna say,
get
general
done.
rule of thumb is the price of things only go up. What I would have to look at, and James, you may have already done this, if you were to just come back and do only curbing on that block on a linear foot basis, yes, it's probably going to cost you more because you'll have to remobilize and all of those things. Now, whether that could be added as an alternate to the next sidewalk project and see whether a better price comes in or something, those are always options.
But
I also have a question about that south side curbing. Is that linked to the stormwater on the north side? Sort of, in a way?
there's already some stormwater infrastructure over there.
Yeah.
You would basically be building the curb and then adding in the drop inlets to get it into the system. Right now, it all runs through a ditch.
Through to the north side? Yeah, there was a curve, there was an inlet structure.
Yeah, everything comes down to Illinois and collects into a big pipe that cuts out across the Calvary Christian property.
So maybe some of this south side curbing is also a part of the sidewalk anyway, with the stormwater component,
Yeah, I mean,
a little bit. Maybe not.
any of the stormwater that is collected by that curb is
Yeah.
going to be transferred over to the system that's being put in on the other side, because it's all being combined there at that intersection.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is figure out if we do the sidewalk and we don't do the curb, how much of that curbing budget gets added to the sidewalk to deal with stormwater on the north side, if any?
None.
Okay, that's all I was getting at.
James, what do you think we should do? What's your advice?
I would put the curb in now, just because we've looked at the next 2 years' worth of projects to get all the way down to the end of the existing sidewalk closer to Morganton. And we're looking at about spending another $200,000 both of those years. That's generally how much we've budgeted every year. So there's not really a lot of leftover room for extras to be added into a future year. So you're potentially kicking the problem out even further than you might think.
So how do we pay for the curbing? That's the same pot of cash that the sidewalk comes out of, correct?
Well, right
It'll
now,
be the same capital project fund,
Right.
yes. It will
Right.
require a transfer from available fund balance or some other location. There isn't enough interest to do the curbing in addition
Right.
to doing the sidewalk
Right.
project.
I don't disagree that if we do one, we do it all, but
I feel like I'm agreeing with Bill, like if we're gonna go ahead and do it, we've got a low bid that's worthwhile.
Projects has Escott done this type of work for us before?
Not for us directly.
They have some track record of this
Yeah,
type of thing.
they're a developer also. It's kind of, this is their commercial arm. So we work with them quite a bit.
Capability to do it.
Yes, yeah, I mean,
Just that, and even looking at the curbing. I mean,
Probably
it's-
actually done some of the work, recent work around here.
what they have, yes.
Yeah.
And their bid, even for the curbing alone, is substantially lower than the other ones.
Sounds like the council's comfortable moving forward.
I think so, yeah.
We'll put the necessary budget amendment together for the March meeting.
Thank you, Reagan.
You want to be heard? You've grabbed the microphone. Is there something you want to say?
Thank you. One last thought that goes through my head is actually if you build it, it could catalyze the redevelopment of that corner in a really positive way
true.
for this area. Because once that goes in, you got a curb, you got a sidewalk, it just begins to look a different way, and you really begin to imagine like, hey, you know what, something's happening here. And this is actually a big selling point for some of our focus area redevelopment strategies is investments that do actually catalyze redevelopment, increase that tax base, and get the underutilized properties within our downtown area and the infill development we talk about. So
Thank you.
Separate note. On the west Wisconsin section between Bennett and Broad, is there an overlay going on that road as a result of that development coming to completion?
There will be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, part of the reason it hasn't been done yet is because we're working on this project, and we didn't want to have the developer pave something that we then have to come through and tear up ourselves.
Okay. You guys ready to move on? That's a yes. All right. All right. So review.
One more time.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking around. The review of the water treatment plant operation bid.
Yep. BJ, can you pull that? There we go. Go ahead and jump to the next page. I'm going to try to run through this a little quick. This is some general information. You can skip to the next page, BJ.
Not take that visual drone. That would way exceed maximum height for a drone. Did you get those buildings on your list?
Oh. So, but some of the history on this, the town built that treatment plant. I want to say it went into operation in 1982 or 83, somewhere around there. From its inception, it has never actually been run by the town. It's always been a contract operation. Many different variations over the years. It has had the same operator. David McHugh has been that water plant's operator since it started. The parent company has changed over time, been bought, but it's actually always essentially been the same company, just under different names. But the last time we put this out to bid was in 2015. We've been operating under that contract since then. We try to do these things every so often just to make sure that we're keeping our contract operator honest and that we're making sure that we're getting a good price. So what you see here is what the price of that operational contract was in 2015. That's the $824,000 number. In that contract, there was some formulas put in place so that we can calculate different components of that bid based on specific CPIs in different areas. So, jump to the next one, BJ. So, as of last year, which would be the current year of the contract that we're operating in, that amount has gone up to what you see here, $942,000. Since 2015, we've seen about a 5.5% increase year over year. Some years it's been less, some years it's been quite a bit more. Here recently, the last 2 years, you can see there we've basically seen 7% increase both of those years.
Why was the tank fee removed?
So when Veolia bought Suez was the most recent iteration of the company. If I go back, United Water was the original contract operator that won the bid in 2015. United Water was bought out by Suez, who also bought Utility Services Group.
Who was our separate tank maintenance group, but they got rolled in under Suez.
It all got combined into a single contract. When Veolia bought Suez, they decided to divest themselves from Utility Services Group. So they are now their own entity, and we contract with them directly again.
The question that I just don't know the answer to, what is the tank fee?
So our elevated storage tanks and the ground storage booster station behind Biscuitville, we pay a company to help us maintain those.
Okay.
They basically put the tanks on a 10 or 20-year schedule.
It's
Painting schedules,
I got you.
maintenance, and then rather than taking a huge hit in 1 year, you basically amortize it out over the length of the contract.
And then,
It's just not mentioned in this.
Right.
There's probably $100,000 that we're paying to someone.
yes, someone
maintenance fee as a separate line item, what is that for?
So the maintenance fee was put in there, and it's never been adjusted since the original contract. Call it like a deductible, maybe a better way to describe it. As something would break at the water plant, instead of them coming to us every time to say, hey, I need $50 to fix something, they had a basic fee that they could just pull off of.
Okay, and then base fee is just their maintenance fee? Not their maintenance fee, their fee for
Their
managing
cost
it,
for
management
everything
fee.
else. Yeah.
Right, gotcha.
So you can jump to the next one, BJ.
Maintenance fee also is a cumulative 12.5 or individual?
Cumulative.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving into the most recent RFP that we put out, we made some changes to try to, manage risk differently and hopefully garner, good pricing. So we took some of the things that our contractor really has no control over, things like utility cost and chemical being a big one. They're at the, I can't think of the word I'm looking for there, but basically they're the will of the market when it comes to buying chemical cost. So we, and this current RFP kind of said, well, we understand that we don't necessarily want to pay for that risk, for them to accept that risk that the market could swing 10, 15% in a year, because they're going to price that and then you're going to pay for it every year. So we basically said, we're going to pay that cost no matter what. So let's just pay what the actual costs are. With some specifications in the bid that basically says, you can't just tell us what it is. You've got to be diligent and bid it out every year and show us the documentation so that we know we're getting good pricing on that also.
And as a large operator of multiple plants, they do have some bulk buying power.
Yes. Couple of minor items we added in. They kind of had been already added over the years, but we made sure to make it specific that if a new operator were to come in, that they would be aware that these things they would have to address. So we put that out back in December. Over the years, we've had one entity that's reached out and shown some interest. There's another group that reached out once we put the bid out, wanted to do a site tour. And then, of course, our current contract operator. Those were the three parties that we were aware were interested in this. At the end of the day, we only got one bid. And the group that asked for the site tour, we set it up and made it an open site tour for anybody that wanted to attend, didn't actually attend. So not sure what happened there, but they seem to have lost interest. But we did get one bid from our current entity, Veolia. You can jump to the next page, BJ. And yes, all right. So here you can see kind of where we got. The original bid, which would have been the base fee, was $715,000. The chemical cost, which is based on our actual usage from last year, so that's a very specific number, was $262,000. There were some, like I mentioned, the utilities and some other minor costs that we said we're going to make direct pass-throughs, or $24,000. So the total bid that was submitted equates to basically $1 million, the $1.2 million you see there. Like we always do, once we got it, we went back to them and said, can we do better? So we worked on a few things. They found an error in their bid. They had actually put $19,000 in taxes in their bid. And we don't need to do that because we don't pay taxes. So that we were able to negotiate the total fee down to $966,000, which is, if you can go one more page, BJ. Very, very close to what we would have expected to have saw if we had done the CPI adjustments to the existing contract. And I tried to put this in a format to make it the most apples to apples comparison that I could.
I think you may have said that, and I apologize if you did. So in prior year's base fees, that included, in comparing that to the current RFP, that included base fee plus chemical fee.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that $929,000 number you see under existing contract.
Yeah.
That is the base fee under the current contract. And all the things that you see in the current proposal would be normally covered under that amount.
And the reason why you took that out was because of the fluctuation of value.
Yeah.
They would price it in there. We would pay for it, even if maybe that didn't happen.
Yeah, it was an effort to try and get a better bid because we were removing some of
Gotcha.
that risk directly
it.
from there.
So, and again, we added a few services in, so not huge dollar amounts, but essentially we are right where we would have been otherwise.
Right.
That is another, when you talk about adding things in, one of the things that obviously occurred during the period of 2015 to now is we also opened a 140 million gallon reservoir down there. Again, not a huge maintenance thing, but David certainly is out there checking on it regularly, and it does add quite a bit of asset value and concern to the site. So that there was at least some significant growth of the operations there during that period.
Absolutely. And once that facility went in, it became a regulated dam.
Yep.
So, and historically, town staff had actually gone down and done the regular dam inspections. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense since plant staff is down there. So that was one of the things we included with this new RFP, just to try to gain a little bit of efficiency on our side also.
Yeah.
Included the comparison of in-house versus contract cost on that last page.
Can you jump down, BJ? Yeah, so this had come up at some point during discussions. So we ran through the numbers. I want to make two big points with this. One, this is simply an operational to operational comparison. We are not accounting for any kind of transitional cost when looking at these two numbers. There would absolutely be some amount of cost. We'd have to buy some additional vehicles because like the pickup trucks at the plant, Veolia provides those to their staff. We don't provide that. So there'd be some things like that that would also push that cost up if we really wanted to consider the in-house, running the plant with in-house staff. But running through the analysis, it was very apparent to us that there's definitely an economy of scale operating here. I mean, you can see alone our estimated staff cost, the $697,000. That's basically the entire Veolia base fee. And that doesn't account for having to send those guys to training, basic telephone cost. There's a lab down there that currently, outside of a major piece of equipment breaking, Veolia covers all those costs. We don't pay every time there's a new beaker or a flask that gets put in. That we would have to start budgeting for things like that. And then a big one, it's kind of built into the departmental supply line items, but we got comparison quotes from some of our neighbors on what they pay for chemicals. And it varies chemical by chemical, but across the board, Veolia beats them by about 10%. So there's a pretty significant savings there just by having them purchase the chemicals.
Did you see where Union County is removing fluoride from their water?
Not.
Yes, sir.
That, but I need to look at that.
Yeah.
Yep.
James, while I still up here?
Only question I had, I can't remember if it was you or if I'm just like totally making this up, where somebody was surprised we didn't in-house. They're like, what do you mean you've been contracting it? That's unusual. Was that? And I couldn't remember why they were surprised by that because we've had good results and this sort of shows that it's.
I think actually Matt
was Matt
Noonsketter brought that
Noonsketter,
up
yeah.
during the CLRP, and
Yeah.
which was really odd because
just
we are
remember
not the
somebody-
only ones
Okay.
doing this. Part
So that's where it
part
was.
of the thing that's hard to put a dollar figure on until you need it is just the duplication that exists in having a large company. I mean, David needs to jump on the line and call somebody. They've got operators literally all over the world now with the way they have grown. You can go to the Rural Water Association and look at their job listings, and these are not easy positions to recruit for. They are few and far between. There's a lot of licensure that is required, and there's positions that have been open for quite some time. So it just having that organization that runs multiple plants of varying nature, both surface and well-based plants, there's a value there. It's hard to put a dollar figure on.
I think it's important to have this and to update it.
Yeah.
So when you do have those questions, it's like, well, it's $1 million more.
No, look at the very bottom line. It's about 50,000.
Okay,
Sorry,
this-
90,000.
80,000 before
Right.
trucks and some of the startup overhead type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it now.
So, no formal action tonight, but if council's good with this, we will proceed on with negotiating an actual contract and have that back before council. Current contract runs out June 30th, so we want to be in a new one before then.
I think that sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, James.
Planning department updates. BJ, we get you up here. Are you gonna stay back there?
May I?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm gonna turn.
Pleases the council, that way I can show you some fun images here. I'm going to run through a quick update of things going on in the planning department, just keep you posted. Last week, February 22nd, there was a planning board meeting where the planning board reviewed a big old package of text amendments related to increasing the use of conditional zoning districts. A lot of stuff that we went through at that planning board meeting. Planning board really dug and really supported that text amendment. They saw the merit in it, and they did recommend unanimously 4-0 to approve it. So it will come to the town council. I'm not going to belabor that text amendment. It's too big. We got time week after next to look at that. The March 12th town council items are coming back at you is the Mill Creek project. You have seen that a number of times. You know the history of that. The only update I can give you is that Paul Sadoff is continuing to work with the Bob Klug and Jack Kramer, the applicants, to try to resolve some of the issues. And staff have given them a deadline of March 5th to get any additional information to us, and we will get it to you guys as quick as we can in those packets. Again, that ordinance amendment 080124, conditional zoning district amendments. I have a quick question. It's really very small thing, but the planning board had a few recommended improvements that I think were excellent and staff fully supports. They're fairly minor, but they were good. I'm going to go ahead and prepare the ordinance with those incorporated in, and then I'll point them out. I'll walk it through. But for the sake of having an ordinance prepared in advance, I'm just going to go ahead and put those in there in the version that comes to you because they were non-controversial, just good. Some of them was even like a typo was one of them. So
Perfect.
is that okay with
Great.
council?
Great.
Great, wonderful.
Why were there only 4 people at planning board?
Oh gosh, let me think.
Do we have a quorum?
4 would be a quorum. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And then 3 that were absent had
Okay.
other things going. Jennifer Garner was in Greensboro for some training and, yeah. Okay.
I'm stunned. I'm thinking we should maybe put some more people on planning board.
No, some people had some gory medical issues. I'll go through
No, no.
those if you want. No,
No, we're good, thanks. I withdraw the question.
that was a joke. They did not have me, no. They also, for the March 12th Town Council, we do have some Board of Adjustment applicants. So there was a discussion about that. Just, I don't know how that will play out, but keep that in mind if you'd like those to come back at some point in the future. We could use some appointments to the Board of Adjustment. Our Board of Adjustment is very light right now. And so we're seeing a few more Board of Adjustment meetings recently. So then coming up in March, the March 21st Planning Board, which of course is what you guys will be seeing in April. We have 2 applications, one of which is an amendment to the Mid-South development, another of which is a PDP for Belle Mead. You may remember they did their CDP a while back. They're bringing in a PDP for the first phase of redevelopment for Belle Mead. Again, those are going to the March 21st Planning Board. Those items are complete. They're on track for processing, and so they will come to you in April. Quick rundown of current projects. We did 5 pre-application reviews in January, 2 so far in February. So we're staying pretty normally busy when it comes to pre-application requests and reviews by our technical review committee. Site plans, we currently have 12 under review in various stages from first review. We have one that is at 7th review right now. I think they're going for the record. And so in various states of review. Construction, we have 19 projects right now that are moving into construction or currently under construction. We have 2 projects we closed out in the last month, which was Dick's and Golf Galaxy, as well as 3, as well as Beehawk and the Lux. When I say close out, what that means is that there's a whole bunch of ants on the anthill at the end of a project, and planning contributes some of those ants to that anthill of reviewing landscaping, lighting, things like that. And we do wind up finding things just like our colleagues in engineering do. We find a lot of really important things that without us looking at those things, they would come back to the town as problems 6 months or 6 years down the road. So it's a great effort by all of us. And then of course we work together. We work with the building inspectors, we work with engineers, we work with everybody to resolve issues. And I gotta, in that instance, give a thanks to our colleagues in engineering, because their additional engineering techs really are increasingly taking a leadership role in finding out what planning's got, finding out what all the different entities have, and then creating a checklist for the developers that I think is very useful to the developers. So we all work together very well on that. We also helped with our colleagues in engineering with doing inspections for closing out bonds. Those are subdivision improvement agreements. We did one for Ravensbrook Phase 2, as well as Carroll Pines Phases 8 and 12. They're working on releasing collateral, and that process, when you get to the end, when they do a bond for stuff, we go in and we help with things like landscaping. We also processed exemptions and minor subdivisions, something we do a lot of, that we spend quite a bit of time on, given what it is back and forth with minor subdivisions and exempt surveys. Okay, just a quick rundown on that. Code compliance, I had 2 stories I wanted to share with you very briefly. The new definition of tourist home that we adopted is already helping Lisa with her work for code compliance. She gets a lot of calls, and she does a really good job of keeping it to a minimum in terms of controversy, in terms of explosion of that issue. But the new definition is already helping in being able to tell people, here's what it is, here's what it's not, and it is what it is now. We don't have to sort of tell them, well, this is our interpretation of it, which was a little more awkward. We also, because you're aware that Golf Galaxy and Dick's Sporting Goods recently opened, we had 2 instances. One was towards as it approached the time period when we went out and inspected landscaping, we went out to inspect the trees along either side of Carolina Green Parkway, and what we found was that the zoning required longleaf pines, and those longleafs have to be a minimum 2-inch caliper. We found that someone had instead decided to swap them out with what appeared to be loblollies that might have been picked from a forest down the road somewhere and replanted, and they were extraordinarily poor quality loblollies. And I think they thought we might not notice, but we did. So they ripped out all the loblollies and replanted them with the required longleafs. So future generations driving that corridor will enjoy the benefit of the aesthetic benefit of those longleafs.
Thank you for that. They did look like Charlie Brown trees. I saw.
They were. We had some good laughs about it, I'll be honest with you. And then not more than a few days later, we were driving by there and we saw they had some signs issues going, and this was the sign situation that they had going at the intersection of Morganton. You can see with my cursor, there's a sign under here. There was another sign back behind here. There's this sign. There's these big Dick's Now Open signs. And we did some aggressive code compliance and let them know that was not going to be acceptable. They need to be removed by Friday at 4:30. And so the intersection looked like this going into the weekend. It was much better. It was much more consistent with Southern Pines' ordinance, quite frankly. And it was much more consistent with our ordinance.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pass that along because the work that was done by James Broadwell, our intern, working with Jean Ruiz, the work was done by Lisa, has really kept that corridor, kept them honest along that corridor, you might say.
While you're at that picture, has there been discussion with the property owner that had an issue with the light across the street? He spoke at our last council meeting. I just keep passing it around. Who wants to answer this?
back to Matt.
Relative to town in discussion with that property owner, I had spoke with him that evening. I am aware that the developer, representative of the developer, had reached out to him the next day, in fact. I do not know whether he has yet received a call or follow-up. There is a standing offer, and again, maybe this has been wrapped up as obviously the end of last week elsewhere, but there's been a standing offer to enter the property and remove the footing that was put in place and try to work something out there. To the best of my knowledge, that has not, outside of what you are all aware of relative to requests that were made, there hasn't been any additional interaction on, nor, to the best of my knowledge, permission to enter the property and right or remove what was installed there.
All right. Is the issue with the?
Something to that.
Yes, of course.
It's not a town issue.
I was going to ask, yeah. Is it DOT or the developer?
NCDOT and a private contractor. It is not the town's issue, and we are not the folks he should be coming to fix it.
And really, at this point, the light itself is a DOT issue. James has reviewed the placement of the new light. That could be made a town issue, and everything is good with that. Relative to what was installed on the previous property, that is now an issue between two private entities.
Well, thank you for following up since he spoke at our meeting. And Mac, thank you for clarifying it's not our issue. Only so much we can do.
Last thing is I'm going to run down long-range planning. I'm going to divide these monthly updates into current planning and long-range planning. And please give me feedback on if there's issues that I hit on that you think next time you'd like me to expand on more, or the things I mentioned that are less useful to you or interesting. Just let me know and I'll adjust this over time. When it comes to long-range planning, this slide is turned out to be something we've all printed and hung in our offices that really guides us and keeps us focused on. I can't tell you how often when we're talking, I look up at the bulletin board and say, okay, well, we still need to work on this one. And so since October 24th, when I came before you at a work session and this slide was adopted without the % complete, these are the projects we've been focusing our efforts on. Soon after that, in December, we lost Rachel, and Rachel was the position that was half long-range planning and implementation. So her projects got redistributed to Elena and myself. And I got to tell you, between Elena and myself taking those on, plus the other members of our team taking on the work that I would have been doing and Elena would have been doing in order to free this up, there was a real sense of pride in working on these projects, knowing that the town wanted these. They were the first out of the gate for the comp plan. It's been just a really, really positive vibe in the office working on these projects. And I have to say a huge thank you to the members of our team, and particularly Elena for a lot of her writing that she's been doing. These are the phase 1 projects. I wanted to give you just a quick visual here and rundown. Obviously, better define a tourist home. That text amendment was done. That was an easy one. We got an easy win, and so that's 100% complete. The next 3 are fairly significant, and they are well underway. And the more legislative development approval processes, that's the conditional zoning district amendment that is coming before you the week after next. That one is 90% complete because planning board is done with it. It's just going to go to town council. That is implementation of a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot of stuff wrapped in there. Coming up right behind that, Elena has been doing a great job of working the process of more protection of existing trees during development. She has worked with a great focus group that she'll explain to you when this comes before you, of who that focus group consists of. They have been working on modifications to Section 4.3, the landscaping code, to also work in what's called a tree protection plan requirement at the time of development. It's a very common thing that other jurisdictions around North Carolina are doing. Again, it's connected with development. So therefore it's defensible under tree protection. But it's a great blend of people on that focus group that are informing her. That is 80% complete because at this point it basically just needs to go through legal review and it needs to go to the planning board for review. We anticipate that one will go to the April planning board. Then right behind that, the consultant is in the last stages of working on the character districts, the 3 character districts, downtown, downtown adjacent, and West Southern Pines. So that project's about 70% complete. At this point, we are still debating whether we bring that in with tree protection in April, which is 2 pretty big separate packages of text amendments. It's possible to bring them in together in the interest of time. It's also possible to stagger those and bring one in the next month. We've encountered an issue with big text amendments like this. If you bring them one in every single month, they begin to trip over each other because the UDO hasn't been updated yet when you're needing to create the text for the next month's amendment. And so you wind up grabbing an old version and it gets a little complicated for the public to understand what is going on. So right now, the concept would be that we would bring either tree protection or character districts to April, then the other one to May, planning board, but then you guys would get it the following months. Then we have accessory commercial units. This one, accessory commercial units, Elena has pre-drafted some text, some code regarding accessory commercial units, but there's a tremendously important step left in that. The accessory commercial units concept came out of the West Southern Pines community and worked into the comprehensive plan. So the preliminary drafting she's done, she has an extensive series of outreach she'd like to do with the West Southern Pines community to make sure that this product, this amendment is going to be useful, is going to be what the community had in mind, is going to allow for the flexibility the community had in mind. So that's why it's at 40%, because although there's some draft work done, there's a lot of outreach to do and a lot of meetings to have. Requiring sidewalks with commercial development, the text of that is pretty much drafted. It just needs to get dropped into the hopper for processing at some point. There's a few things that we'll work through with our colleagues in engineering. And then beginning discussions regarding the future of the old US 1 triangle with landowners. That is something that, because the phase 1 project was to begin those discussions, we're 20% underway because we've met with some of them. We have spoken about this and we've pitched the project to see how much interest there is. This is a picture, if you look at the bottom right picture, that is the focus area C rendering from the comprehensive plan. And the picture on the top left is the exact same view, the exact same angle, taken by drone. And it was, you can see that, for example, there is you can see where the mini storage is on the left picture, and then you can see the same mini storage with a mural on the side of it just to get oriented. You can see the triangle of where where it was. When they were doing this rendering, they were thinking, how do we dress up that self-storage building a little bit to make it part of a place, to give it some sense of place. But you can see the Fidelity Bank is in there. But you can also see that a lot of other properties that are ripe for redevelopment. This is a reimagining of that area. This rendering we are using as a tool because a picture can be worth 1,000 words in terms of just implementing a vision, implementing some interest amongst landowners in that area who are current landowners, but many of which are also investment landowners. So they're looking at, hey, you guys can't do this on your own, and we can't do this on our own. So we need to come together, we need to work together because both of us have a role in envisioning a new future place in Southern Pines like the one that's in the comp plan. So.
You finished?
Oh, yeah, and so that's the status on the long-range plan projects. I'll keep you posted on this using a slide or something like this. I got to give credit to Jessica. She pitched the idea of sort of going back to the same slide and using these little graphics for it. She's good with that type of communication.
Here's my question after that slide. That's fantastic. Thank you. This is like where we can see like the comp plan coming to life. Here's my question for you so that we can better understand your pressures. Given everything that you guys do, you and Elena, losing Rachel, how much percentage of your time are you doing this versus all the other stuff that you react to in your office? Like, it's just like right now, 5% of your time and
Oh,
this.
no.
I mean, how much are you doing to the plans and the projects and all that versus this? Because I would love to know that we have capacity to continue these forward and that our current situation is not meaning this is getting, a small percentage and moving slowly.
This is the stuff that, as a planner, you want to work on, that you have a passion for, that you see implementing a vision, implementing a plan, so we make time for it. The other work in the office is so variable. Commercial inquiries, you can get a spike. I can tell you any day you call me, like sometimes we refer to it as we're under a surge right now, and it's like, I don't know how to describe it other than, when you go to the grocery store, there's nobody at the checkouts. And when you go up there, everybody in the store seems to have gone to the checkouts at the same time. It's like as humans, we somehow have this energy. Feasibility inquiries, project submittals kind of tends to follow a similar energy and a similar rhythm. So I say that because we could get any month, we could get a surge, if you will, of applications that would be all hands on deck, and this stuff literally just has to go by the wayside. So when I say some of these goals for when we're bringing it, We've had some issues come up lately that we had to bump a couple of these back a month, but that's okay. You know, we're doing the best we can. So I don't have a good answer to your question because there's weeks where I don't touch long range planning, and then the next week I'll be able to look at my schedule and say I'm going to block out these 3 days to write code, and our team knows I got a sticky note on the door and they cover for me. Same with Elena, and we're able to knock out code. So we're doing everything we can as quickly as we can because we want to keep the energy, we want to keep the momentum, we want to keep people's interest. We want to make sure that this important document right here, the less we talk about it, the less we think about it, the less we look at it, the less we open and show people pictures of duplexes as they can be reimagined, et cetera, then the greater the risk that people forget about it and it does go on the shelf. So that's why we're hustling to do that, and I credit our team for that energy, and I thank you for asking that question and giving me the opportunity to mention it.
Thank you and Elena for all you've done.
Yeah, and the whole team, true. Because like I said, if we're doing this, the others are kicking in to help us with stuff. And Gene and our intern James, holy cow, they're out in the field. They're everywhere all the time, all at once right now. It's very, very cool.
And Jessica, I appreciate this graphic. It is nice. I think bringing this back is a great visual for all of us to see that we're implementing something that was important. I appreciate it. Do you all have any questions for BJ? Thank you for the thorough update. That was good.
Feedback if you want additional information or less of something or more of something over the months. Happy to do it.
For now, I think that was great. All right. Round table. Brandon, would you like to start us off on round table? Anything to mention?
Sure, since this is my first council roundtable. I just wanted to mention that I enjoyed going to the Essentials class in Chapel Hill with you guys, and I thought it was a valuable class. I have done my survey and submitted it this morning. And secondly, I just wanted to mention, I know I mentioned this to a couple of you guys, I want to kind of give kudos to the NCDOT for removing all the plantings on Morganton Road. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it, but last week they worked at removing all of those plantings and replacing them. And they may be done by now, but anyway, it looks a lot better than it has.
There was a lot of shutdown there today. I don't know if they were finishing it or doing something else.
Kind of the good thing was some of that was happening at the same time as the shopping center, so it was like inconvenience to begin with at one part of it, so might as well just make it an inconvenience for the whole trip. But I think they're pretty much done with it. But anyway, that's all I have.
It does look good. Anne?
I have no roundtable, but I do want to make an appointment to meet with Reagan at some point, just for some things that I'd like to clarify. And then I'll be back to roundtable with lots of goodies.
That sounds good.
Reagan's excited.
Bill?
Nothing, just I guess now that we're full 5, I don't ever remember, and if we did, I must have missed it. Make the appointments for some of those
do
smaller
need to address
boards, so I just want to make sure we do that at the next meeting. You said something that reminded me about going to Tri-Cities, and I was like, well, I don't ever remember us actually formally establishing that, and so make sure we do that sooner than later.
I do think either Reagan and I spoke about it, or I spoke to you about it, that we were going to keep me and you on Tri-Cities.
Okay.
So
Which is fine, but,
yeah.
and there was other things too, so I just want to make sure.
Thank you for
That
mentioning
we
that.
don't forget that. Yes, the essentials planning was great. All 5 of us are now up to speed on our ethics requirement, and also another day and a half of training that we did, which was great.
I will echo that. I think it was really nice that all 5 of us, plus Reagan and Mac, made it to the Essentials training. I think it was time well spent in the training and having dinner and just socializing and having personal time with all of you. I thought that was really nice. Ann and I were both at the BHOC ribbon cutting. Was that last week? Last Wednesday? Okay.
Bill was there. But
You were there. You left. That's why I
had to-
forgot. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The second time you've been called out for leaving. He had someplace to be.
School play.
Thank you
Sorry.
for being there. But also thank you for, I appreciate that there was a really good showing of staff who showed up. So it was nice to see a large group supporting a new business.
And I'll give credit to Brad and Jessica for that. It is not typical that they necessarily, for an event like that, would extend the invitation, but they were very specific about inviting the leadership team and staff. So a big thank you to them on that.
And they had nice things to say about Southern Pines. So that was, if you were there for it, you heard it, but if not,
for Bill's shout out.
Yes, along with Bill's shout out.
BJ had a pretty severe shout out too, and a good, meaning severe in the most positive
In the most
way.
positive way. And then just a quick reminder that we moved the March work session. So our next meeting is March 12th, and then we'll have a work session the Tuesday following on the 19th. And that is all I had. Reagan, do you have any follow-up thoughts? Or anything we forgot to mention?
Yeah, regroup. What did you just say?
I said the work session was on the 19th.
Work session on the 19th, you did them backward, okay, got it.
Yep.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah, we talked about that, but good. I don't think the town calendar shows that correctly yet.
It is on the, when I went
Wasn't on
today
mine.
looking for
Maybe it is.
agenda, it was listed as future events there at least.
We'll verify that. And no, I have nothing additional. Thank you.
Okay. I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Any second?
Aye.
Oh, yeah.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.